Chapter 2207. The Changes of the Cloud Plain. In the depths of the imperial palace of the Shi Empire, 3 ancient stone towers stood silently within a forbidden ground. The 3 stone towers represented the absolute power of the Shi Empire. Apart from the current Shi Emperor, they were all the chaotic primes of the empire. They spent most of their time in seclusion within the stone tower, away from worldly affairs. The 3 of them would only be alarmed if extremely dire matters that could threaten the empire happened. But at this moment, the 3 chaotic primes who normally stayed in their own towers were gathered together. Even the dignified Shi Emperor sat below sternly in his dragon robes. The heavenless demon exalt of the Tian Empire has broken through. A storm of blood will be kicked up on the cloud plain soon, and those involved will be the peak organizations who stand at the apex of the plain. However, our Shi clan, as one of the 4 eternal empires of the Cloud Plain, control over 80% of the territory in the northern region, so we can't just stay out of this storm. We will definitely be dragged in. There are only 2 choices presented before us right now. The first choice is to yield to the Tian Empire and become one of their subsidiary, where we follow their orders from today onwards. The other choice is to join the resistance and oppose the Tian Empire's path to domination together. I wonder what the 3 of you think of this matter? The oldest ancestral emperor, Shi Lianxue, asked emotionlessly as he looked at the 3 other people. Shi Haoshuan, Shi Haoming, and the current Shi Emperor, Shi Ziyun, remained silent. Although there have been cases where an entire plain has been united under a single rule throughout history, it doesn't happen frequently. As a result, I don't think it'll be easy for the Tian clan to conquer the entire Cloud Plain this time. There will definitely be a resistance led by the Heavens Link Peak. Even if the heavenless demon exalt has broken through and the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak is no longer his opponent, that doesn't mean he can't put up a fight. After a moment of thought, the Shi Emperor's father, Shi Haoshuan, broke the silence first and analyzed carefully. You're right. After all, the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak held the title of the strongest on the Cloud Plain before the heavenless demon exalt had broken through. His battle prowess is exceptional and rarely does he have an opponent at the same level. Even if he's no longer the heavenless demon exalt's opponent, he will still able to put up a fight, said Shi Haoming. He held great confidence in the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. It doesn't matter whether the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak is the opponent of the heavenless demon exalt. If we yield to the Tian clan, we will definitely face obstruction from the God's Fallen clan. After all, the God's Fallen clan receives a large number of tributes from us every year. Once we yield to the Tian clan, it means they will lose our tributes permanently. As a result, they will never just stand by and let us yield to the Tian clan, the Shi Emperor said firmly. He continued, compared to yielding to the Tian clan and placing all our chips on them, I'd rather maintain our relationship with the God's Fallen clan. What if I recommend standing with the Tian clan? Shi Lianxue raised an eyebrow and looked at the 3 of them. Ancestral Emperor, we must consider this matter thoroughly. The Shi Emperor, Shi Haoming, and Shi Haoshuan all objected. They disagreed with yielding to the Tian clan. The Ancestral Emperor, Shi Lianxue, nodded. Since the 3 of you have doubts in the Tian clan's plan to unite, then. As soon as he reached there, a black demonic aura suddenly flashed through Su Lianxue's pupils. His face immediately turned cold, and with a thought, a powerful pulse of energy radiated out. Countless strands of energy appeared out of nowhere, wrapping around Shi Ziyun, Shi Haoshuan, and Shi Haoming. Not only was Shi Lianxue the ancestral emperor of the Shi Empire in the eyes of Shi Ziyun, Shi Haoshuan, and Shi Haoming, he was also the senior they admired the most. The 3 of them had never thought that Shi Lianxue, who was basically family, would suddenly attack them. As a result, they were caught off guard, and they became tightly bound by the threads of energy. Moreover, some of the threads entered their bodies, not only immobilizing them but also sealing up their cultivation and the senses of their souls. Ancestral Emperor, Yu, Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming looked at Shi Lianxue, who they respected the most, in disbelief. At that moment, they only felt their hearts ache. The Shi Emperor's face sank instead. He glared at Shi Lianxue emotionlessly and said coldly, Ancestral Emperor, what are you trying to do? I can't get you to join the Tian clan, so this is all I can do. Our Shi Empire will be standing on the Tian clan's side this time, and we will be assisting them with all we have to conquer the Cloud Plain, said Shi Lianxue. This did not just happen in the Shi Empire of the northern region. The Blood Sun Empire of the southern region, the Zhao Empire of the eastern region, and the Jinjian Empire of the western region all suffered similar incidents at different times. All the peak experts in the imperial family who disagreed with supporting the Tian clan had been trapped through various means by the people who held the greatest authority. In that short period of time, the four renowned eternal empires of the Cloud Plain had silently changed hands. The black-robed heavenless demon Exalt gathered with the two other grand primes of the Tian Empire in a majestic hall within the imperial palace. They were all silent. The heavenless demon Exalt sat in the air with his eyes closed while the other two grand primes both stared at him. At this moment, the eyes of the heavenless demon Exalt snapped open. He said indifferently, "The four eternal empires of the Cloud Plain are under my control. We can start the plan." Fantastic! With the submission of the four empires, we have absolute control over the four regions. Next, we only need to focus on dealing with the peak clans. The other two grand primes of the Tian Empire beamed. A vicious light suddenly flashed through the heavenless demon Exalt's eyes. He said coldly, "Before we deal with them, let's eliminate the foreigners first. Let's start with the Empyrean demon cult first." What? You want to move against the Empyrean demon cult? Are you confident that you can deal with their great elder? Provoking the Empyrean demon cult at a time like this might not be a clever decision. The two other grand primes became fearful when the Empyrean demon cult was mentioned. It's no problem. Although the great elder of the Empyrean demon cult once had a glorious battle record, his strongest opponent was only at the second heavenly layer, so I'm certain that he's at the third heavenly layer at most. There's no need for us to fear him. And the reason why we should start with the Empyrean demon cult is because their branch has soul beads and blood beads refined from many lives. It's exactly what I need to refine my treasure, said the heavenless demon Exalt coldly. As he said that, he extended a hand. Immediately, several dozen cultivators below the primordial realm exploded to death across the Cloud Plain. The space rings on their fingers exploded as well as a small, black banner flew out. After absorbing the souls of those cultivators, the banner shot off with lightning speed. At the same time, streaks of black light shot over from afar and arrived before the heavenless demon Exalt. They turned into small, black flags in the end. There were a total of 80 of them. The heavenless demon Exalt suddenly frowned when he looked at the black banners. He growled, "Why is one of my 9 soul-gathering banners missing?" Chapter 2208, The Tian Yuan Clan. I'd like to see just who took my 9 soul-gathering banner. The heavenless demon Exalt snorted coldly afterwards. With a thought, the tremendous senses of his soul surged out like a flood, enveloping the entire Cloud Plain. However, his face sank very soon. The senses of his soul had engulfed the entire Cloud Plain. Apart from the few peak clans that were protected by formations, he had scoured every inch of the land, including underground. Despite doing so, he still failed to find the missing banner. It looks like the missing banner has either been hidden by a peak clan or taken away from the Cloud Plain. However, the 81 banners are refined from my demonic blood, so every single one of them are linked to my mind. Let me see just which peak clan dares to take what's mine. Even if the banner has been taken away from the Cloud Plain by someone, I can still locate it with great precision, the heavenless demon Exalt said coldly. Immediately, the demonic aura around him churned as he emitted a pulse of terrifying energy. He used a secret technique to find the location of the last banner. The other two grand primes of the Tian Empire sat before the heavenless demon Exalt silently. Currently, the two of them had become stern as well. The heavenless demon Exalt was crucial to whether they could conquer the Cloud Plain. They did not wish to see any accidents happen. A while later, the demonic aura around the heavenless demon Exalt gradually calmed down. He opened his eyes, and they were filled with cruelty. His face had sunken. "Heavenless, have you found the final banner?" One of the grand primes asked rather nervously before the heavenless demon Exalt. "I actually can't sense the final banner at all. However, even if a banner is missing, it won't be able to affect our grand plan of unifying the cloud plane. The divine kingdom of Pingtian that had once been nameless in the southern region was basically an existence that everyone knew about now. Not only had it morphed from a weak divine kingdom into an ancient empire with a primordial realm expert, but most importantly, the Tianyuan clan existed within it. In terms of strength, the Tianyuan clan was nothing on the southern region. Some people would not even take them seriously. However, there were no organizations on the vast southern region that dared to underestimate the Tianyuan clan, much less offend them. That was because their greatest elder was the only daughter of the current emperor of the Shi Empire. The Shi Emperor was a renowned emperor among the 4 eternal empires. For the sake of avenging his daughter, he went as far as to kill most of the members of his imperial family. Even the prestigious Grand Imperial Protector of the Shi Empire was not spared. His viciousness and mercilessness had already engraved itself into the hearts of people, making countless people shiver. At the same time, his love for his daughter was something that many people admired. As a result, with such a forceful and vicious father, there was naturally no one who dared to offend Shiyu in both the northern and southern regions. The Tianyuan clan she resided in gained glory as a result, enjoying a status that did not match up to their strength at all. The Tianyuan clan remained in the same location in the Dong'an province of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. However, it had already changed dramatically compared to when Jianshan departed in the past. Not only did its territory grow by several times over, but it also possessed a more generous bearing. It was possible to see from afar that their fabulous buildings were laid down in an orderly manner. They seemed grand and magnificent, giving off an almost holy aura. A few figures strolled through the fragrant gardens of the Tianyuan clan at this moment. I never thought that so much would have happened after I left the Tianyuan continent. The world of the Tianyuan continent had almost been destroyed as well, but thankfully everyone toughed it out. A young man with a striking appearance sighed emotionally. He wore white robes and seemed like he was in his 20s. The only pity is that after coming all the way from the Prosper Plain, all I got to see was you, the little tiger, and the 2 kids. The 3 seniors, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, Hei Yu, and that snake are not here. The young man shook his head in pity. His voice contained undisguised reminiscence and memories. Unsurprising, the young man was Ming Dong. You're the kid. You're the kid. You can't bully people just because you're taller. Let me tell you, I'm a little ancestor who has lived for over 1,000,000 years. Who knows how many years I slumbered for before you were born on the Tianyuan continent. Even your ancestors aren't as old as me. A pure girl who only seemed to be 11 or 12 glared at Ming Dong with her hands on her hips as she fumed. Naturally, the girl was Xiao Ling. Xiao Jin and Sacred Feather were with them as well. Xiao Jin still wore his golden clothes, where he seemed like he was made out of gold. He had already grown up now. He seemed much more mature, no longer the little boy from Flame City. Sacred Feather seemed like a handsome young man now. He stood up straight as he strolled slowly with his hands on his back. He was serious and cold in everything he did. He gave off the bearing of an expert. Ming Dong only knew the 3 of them out of the entire Tianyuan clan. Newbies Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and Heiya had already gone out roaming several years ago. As for Xiong Zhong, Qing Jingyun, and so on who came from the world of Forsaken Saints, Ming Dong did not know any of them. Oh, is this little sister really that old? I really couldn't tell. A beautiful woman in snow-white clothes looked at the unaging Xiao Ling from beside Ming Dong with her large beautiful eyes as she laughed gently while covering her mouth. She was the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire that Ming Dong had met and killed a clone of in the Neptunian Divine Palace, Yun Xiaoyan. Ming Dong did not become interested at all when he looked at the beautiful Yun Xiaoyan beside him. Instead, his heart became filled with bitterness and helplessness, which mixed together in an indescribable mess. He could not help but think about what his 8th senior had said to him when he emerged from the Neptunian Divine Palace. Junior brother, your senior, I have a grasp over the way of fate. I can see the fates of many people and even vaguely peer into the karma of a person's past life. In you and Yun Xiaoyan's past life, Yun Xiaoyan was deeply in love with you and once did many things for you, but you always let her down, deeply hurting her heart. In the end, Yun Xiaoyan died because of you. Her life ended because of you. The two of you having the chance to meet in this life might be the secret arrangement of the strands of fate. As a result, you can't let her down again in this life. The Eighth Majesty did not tell him about what had happened between them in their past lives because even she was only able to see the surface and not the full picture. However, just that was enough to make it no longer possible for Ming Dong to treat Yun Xiaoyan cruelly. Ninth Majesty, secret arrangements are occurring in various places across the cloud plain. It's the calm before the storm. Something major might be about to happen. At this moment, a gleam of golden light flashed through the eyes of the scholarly, middle-aged man who followed Ming Dong every step along the way. Ming Dong dismissed his thoughts when he heard that. He said indifferently, "I don't care what happens as long as the Tianyuan clan is unscathed." Chapter 2209, Going to the Desolate Plain, 1. The Azure Pern King hasn't followed us. It looks like we've shaken him off. Jianchen flew as quickly as he could with the Anata Tower through the danger-ridden spatial crack. He paid attention to the situation of the outside world at all times. He seems to be trapped in the temporal vortex. Temporal vortices really are extremely wondrous. The flow of time varies indefinitely. The Azure Pern King was not much slower than us in charging into the temporal vortex, but we were completely unaffected, while the Azure Pern King was trapped in there, said Jianchen. He glanced at the Anata Tower. He was uncertain whether it was because of luck or because the Anata Tower's quality was just too great that they managed to emerge from the temporal vortex unaffected. Or perhaps it was because of Jianchen himself. Although Jianchen had been hiding within the Anata Tower when they charged into the temporal vortex, he had experienced a wondrous feeling inside. During that moment, he felt like his soul had established an obscure connection with the chaotic laws of time in the temporal vortex, where he seemed to be able to sense their existence. However, because the Anata Tower had only stayed in the temporal vortex for a split second, and the laws there were extremely chaotic, he failed to gain any substantial benefits. That should be a part of luck. After all, I haven't grasped the laws of time, so it's impossible for me to affect the temporal vortex, thought Jianchen. It was so close before. Thankfully, we charged into the temporal vortex in time, and thankfully, the power of laws in there did not affect us. Otherwise, we would have been killed off by the power of time in the vortex before the Azure Pern King even caught up to us. Kaya patted her chest as she said gladly from beside Jianchen. She felt like she had just survived a disaster. Suddenly, Jianchen's face hardened. He looked at Kaya in confusion and said, "Oh right. Kaya, why were you able to detect the Azure Pern King sooner than me?" This had been puzzling Jianchen. He knew that Kaya was the same as him, where she could detect the situation outside. However, the sensitivity she previously demonstrated was actually even more terrifying than him, who was basically half a master of the Anata Tower. He struggled to accept this. Kaya furrowed her brows in thought. She had no idea how to explain this to Jianchen because even she did not understand why her soul had suddenly strengthened earlier. "I don't know why. I just suddenly had that feeling." Kaya explained it like that after thinking for half a day. Jianchen nodded and no longer tried to pry anymore. He had begun suspecting that Kaya was the reincarnation of some expert from the various signs Kaya had shown since long ago. Naturally, he knew that this would be due to Kaya's former life. After all, even he had reincarnated. The sword spirits had wrapped around his soul and made him reborn on the Tianyuan continent. Brother Jianchen, why have you come in here?" At this moment, a delighted voice rang out from afar. The radiant God King in luxurious, white robes, Xian Ming, shot over from afar like a bolt of lightning as he shone with holy light. He arrived before Jianchen and Kaya in the blink of an eye, looking at the two of them with a face full of smiles. "Sai, we're currently being hunted down by the Azure Pern King. We fled into a spatial crack, and we had no other choice but to hide here," Jianchen sighed gently. His gaze toward Xian Ming and was slightly shameful. He knew that he had probably drawn Xian Ming into the matter now. After all, with the Azure Pern King's temperament, he probably would not spare Xian Ming once he found out that Xian Ming was connected to Jianchen, even if it was just through something insignificant. What? The Azure Pern King? one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Lone Heaven Plain, the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance Mountain, the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance? Xian Ming's face changed drastically as he paled in fright. That's right, it's him, said Jianchen. He had heard quite a few rumors regarding the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Peng King on planet Tianming. God damn it. Of all the people you could provoke, why the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance? I've heard my father mention the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance before. He said he's unruly, petty, and vengeful. He's known for being difficult to deal with in the Saints' world. Not only is he powerful, but his speed is also known to be unmatched. Even peak experts with the laws of space can't necessarily capture him unless they possess an absolute advantage in strength. There definitely won't be any good outcomes from offending the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance. We're in deep trouble now, Xian Ming growled with an ugly expression. Woes weighed on his heart. You don't need to worry too much. As long as you hide here without worrying, even if the tower ends up in the hands of the Azure Peng King, you'll be safe for some time. Moreover, the Azure Peng King should be trapped in a temporal vortex right now. It should be able to keep him trapped for a while, which will give us some time to catch our breaths, said Jianchen. He knew that the Enata Tower had been completely exposed after what happened on planet Tianming. According to his predictions, the experts of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing would hurry over very soon as long as no accidents happened. Let alone just a while, but even if it traps the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance for a few years or even a few decades, we won't be able to escape his pursuit with our strength. Xian Ming became restless like there were ants in his pants. He constantly paced around as he was filled with unease. Let's go to a place where even the Azure Peng King dares not make trouble, like one of the 7 sacred plains of the Saints' world, Jianchen said calmly. The first place he thought of was the Prosper Plain where the Heavenly Palace of Bixing resided. The 7 sacred plains were supreme existences in the Saints' world. Every single sacred plain had a grand exalt. So the reason why they were sacred was completely because of the 7 grand exalts. When he heard that, Xian Ming's face immediately lit up. He said excitedly, I know. I'll tell you a good place to go to. Don't go to the 7 sacred plains. Go to the Desolate Plain. Our Radiant Saint Hall just happens to reside on the Desolate Plain. Is the Desolate Plain safer than the 7 sacred plains? Jianchen was doubtful. Xian Ming sniggered and said with complete confidence, I knew you'd worry about that. But you don't need to worry at all. As long as you go to the Desolate Plain, the Azure Peng King won't be able to cause any trouble at all because the place is off limits for him. If he dares to set foot on the Desolate Plain, his own life will be in danger. Since your Desolate Plain has such an expert, why has your Radiant Saint Hall been forced into such a miserable state by the great demon you speak of? Jianchen asked. Xian Ming immediately deflated like a balloon from that. He sighed in dejection. He won't care about the matters of our Radiant Saint Hall. Let alone right now, when it's just a few Radiant God Kings, even if our entire Radiant Saint Hall is destroyed, many of the large organizations on the Desolate Plain wouldn't even bat an eye. No one is willing to provoke an expert like that just for us, including the organizations that we're on good terms with. Jianchen, let's go to the Desolate Plain. Since the Radiant Saint Hall is on the Desolate Plain, there's a reason why you have to go there, said Kaya. Chapter 2210, Going to the Desolate Plain, 2, Ori. The Desolate Plain it is then. Jianchen hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Indeed, there was a reason why he had to go to the Desolate Plain. The Radiant Saint Hall resided on the Desolate Plain. Ever since he came to the Saints' world, he had struggled to make any progress with his Radiant Saint force. Even now, his cultivation realm as a Radiant Saint Master remained at the same level as when he was on the Tianyuan continent. It was not because he did not want to increase it. Rather, it was because he lacked the cultivation method. During this time, he had considered creating his own cultivation method, but the creation of each one would take a lengthy period of time. It required countless predictions and experiments before taking shape. As a result, creating a cultivation method clearly did not suit Jianchen. I have a star chart here. It accurately displays the locations of the 49 planes and 81 planets of the Saints' world as well as some forbidden zones that you should never set foot in, said Xianming. Jian Chen's decision to go to the desolate plain immediately delighted Xianming. Immediately, he gave Jian Chen his star chart as if he was afraid that Jian Chen would get lost. The desolate plain was Xianming's home, so Jian Chen perfectly understood Xianming's feelings. He accepted the star chart from Xianming and said to Kaya, "Let's not tarry. We'll head there right now. We have to get to the desolate plain before the Azure Peng King breaks free." Afterwards, Jian Chen piloted the Anata Tower in search of a way out. In the Saint's world, when he and Kaya combined their efforts, they could just barely rip open space. However, they dared not do that in the spatial crack, even when Jian Chen's chaotic body had reached the 13th layer. This was because it was just too dangerous. Danger basically laid at every step. Even the slightest ripple of energy could set off a chain reaction and lead to even more severe danger. If they used their full strength here, terrifying consequences would have occurred before they could rip open space. After all, they did not possess strength as terrifying as the Azure Peng Kings, where he had no need to fear the threats here. As a result, they had to find another way out. However, Jian Chen had the Anata Tower protecting him. As long as he did not go outside, he could go anywhere in the spatial crack. As a result, he found a crack that led to the outside world. The crack was very small, only a meter long. Without any hesitation, Jian Chen immediately shrunk the Anata Tower to the size of a finger and charged out from the tiny crack. However, as soon as he returned to the Saint's world, pulses of powerful energy swept over. Nearby, a colossal space beast was engaged in an intense battle against a bloodied old man. Whether it was the space beast or the old man, they were both extremely powerful. The shockwaves of energy from their fight formed terrifying storms that swept through the sky, causing it to collapse and become covered with cracks. The Anata Tower charged out from one of those cracks. Jian Chen did not stick his nose into the old man's business. He carefully hid and charged far away because the space beast and the old man were both existences that he could not deal with. The old man was completely suppressed by the space beast. He devoted his efforts to the battle, so he clearly failed to notice the tiny Anata Tower. In the end, Jian Chen basically slipped away from right in front of them with the Anata Tower. Fortunately, we're close to planet Scarlet Cloud of the 81 planets. With our speed, we should be able to reach there in a day. Hopefully we can make it. Jian Chen stowed the Anata Tower away and took out a small spaceship that Xianming had given him. He unfurled the star chart and hurried off to planet Scarlet Cloud full speed ahead. Xianming's spaceship was of impressive quality. It was extremely fast. In the end, the estimated day's journey was completed in just 4 hours. They arrived on the Scarlet Cloud plain. This time, he did not have Kaya accompanying him. After disguising himself once again, he set foot on the planet alone. He directly made his way to a teleportation formation that could take people across planes. The desolate plain is 505 colored divine crystals per a person. Remember, you can't have anything living in your spatial treasures. Once the formation senses something, there'll be severe consequences. A guard who managed the teleportation formations warned Jian Chen sternly. Jian Chen was secretly stunned when he heard the price. He knew that the price would be very high, so high that even a primordial realm expert would become troubled, but he had never thought it would be so high. 100 supreme quality divine crystals were only worth a single one-colored divine crystal. 10 one-colored divine crystals were worth a single two-colored divine crystal, while 10 two-colored divine crystals were worth a single three-colored divine crystal. This went on, so a single 5-colored divine crystal was equivalent to 10,000 one-colored divine crystals. If it was exchanged to supreme quality divine crystals, a single 5-colored divine crystal would be equivalent to 1,000,000 supreme quality divine crystals. Yet, a single teleportation cost 500 of them. It simply had to be mentioned that the price for teleportation this time was exorbitant. Jian Chen gasped. He handed over 500 5-colored divine crystals rather painfully before entering the teleportation emotionlessly. The guards near the teleportation formation all paid close attention to Jian Chen. Along the way to the teleportation formation, there were special formations that could check whether people were carrying anything living in their spatial treasures. Basically, All the people who controlled planar teleportation formations in the Saints' world would forbid people from carrying anything living with them for the sake of profit. It would not affect the stability of the formation at all. It was purely for profit. It was also because of this reason that many rather powerful clans and organizations would rather take an arduous journey through space on a spaceship than to take teleportation formations. However, Jian Chen was not worried about the formations discovering that he carried other with him. The Inata Tower was an impressive god artifact after all. It could not be discovered through any old formation. Even Qing Yishuan and He Ya had been shifted from the Divine Hall into the Inata Tower. In the end, Jian Chen passed through the formation successfully and left planet Scarlet Cloud to go to the Desolate Plain. When Jian Chen left planet Scarlet Cloud, the Azure Pen King finally charged out of the temporal vortex in the spatial crack. He could see that the Inata Tower had already vanished, so his expression became extremely ugly. Even its traces have vanished. It looks like I've been trapped for quite some time. However, I have a droplet of your blood, so no matter where you go, you can't escape from me, the Azure Pen King said through gritted teeth. In a primarily pink, warmly decorated room of the Tian Yuan clan, Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin sat at a table. They ate fruit as they talked to each other leisurely. At this moment, a black-robed old man with an ordinary appearance appeared behind Xiao Ling silently like a ghost. The first to discover the old man was Xiao Jin, who sat opposite to Xiao Ling suddenly, his eyes narrowed, and he immediately stood up. He called out, "Who are you?" The old man was amiable. He looked at Xiao Ling curiously, but he felt confused inside. He thought, this girl is only at reciprocity, so why has Master sent me personally to receive her? What? Grandpa, who are you? How did you get in here? Xiao Ling also discovered the old man behind her. Her pure little face was filled with surprise. The old man said nothing. He did not give off any presence either such that he seemed ordinary. He studied Xiao Ling for a while before carefully taking out a lock of hair. He held the lock of hair with both hands as if it was extremely important. Even respect filled his face. Chapter 22:11. Heavenless takes action. However, the instant Xiao Ling saw the lock of hair, she became stunned. Her large, bright, and pure eyes stared at the lock of black hair that the black-robed old man held with both hands. Gradually, her eyes turned red as tears pooled up rapidly. In the next moment, Xiao Ling suddenly broke out into tears. Tears ran down her face along with memories. Master, where are you? Have you abandoned Xiao Ling? Have you forgotten Xiao Ling? Xiao Ling really misses you so much. Xiao Ling took the lock of hair from the old man's hands and pressed it against her face gently as she sobbed with a heavy sense of longing. Xiao Jin, who stood to one side, could not endure it when he saw how sorrowful Xiao Ling had become. Suddenly, he looked at the old man of unknown origins and asked, "Where did you get the lock of hair from?" Xiao Jin had spent so much time with Xiao Ling naturally, he knew that his sister Xiao Ling had a master in the past. Now that he saw Xiao Ling suddenly remember her master from the lock of hair, he naturally understood that the lock of hair came from Xiao Ling's master. The old man ignored Xiao Jin. Currently, Xiao Jin was basically non-existent in his eyes. He did not raise the old man's attention at all. He directed all his attention towards Xiao Ling, who held the lock of hair as she sobbed. "Little sister, sense it closely. Is the presence on the lock of hair really your master's? Are you completely certain?" The old man asked carefully. His gaze towards Xiao Ling became extremely strange. "It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. This is my master's presence. This is my master's presence. It's impossible for me to get my master's presence wrong," Xiao Ling said with absolute confidence. With tears on her cheeks, she looked at the old man hopefully and sobbed, "Grandpa, please tell me where you got my master's hair from. Please. I really want to see my master." Xiao Ling was basically begging. Her longing for her master had basically accumulated over 1,000,000 years. Even when she came to the Saints' world with Jian Chen, her primary objective was to find her master. This was because in Xiao Ling's life, her master was like her father. He was an extremely important figure in her life that no one could replace. The old man sucked in a deep breath, and his gaze towards Xiao Ling changed drastically. Only after a while of silence did he say, "I am Cheng Ming, a servant of my master. You can directly call me by my name. The lock of hair came from my master, and he gave it to me. He sent me to the cloud plain in search of you with the lock of hair. He wanted me to take you away. If you want to see your master, please come with me." "Is your master Mo Tianyun?" Xiao Jin asked as he stared at Cheng Ming in shock. Xiao Jin was not unfamiliar with Mo Tianyun. He was a legendary figure in the history of the Tianyuan continent, one of the 4 champions of the ancient times. His renown had lasted for 1,000,000 years, affecting generations to come. Cheng Ming frowned. He glanced at Xiao Jin with quite some displeasure and said coldly, "I dare not discuss about my master's name so casually. Do not ask for it recklessly." "All right, I'll go with you. I want to see my master soon. However, I have to take brother Xiao Jin with me," Xiao Ling immediately replied. Her master's position in her heart was unshakable. No one could replace him. Now that she had finally received news of her master, she was tempted to fly to his side immediately. "Of course, we'll set off immediately. Go bid farewell to your friends outside, just in case it leads to some misunderstanding," Cheng Ming said and glanced outside. Xiao Ling nodded. Suddenly, her heart began to burn warmly as she ran out eagerly and excitedly. She wanted to bid farewell to the people of the Tianyuan clan. However, as soon as Xiao Ling opened the door, she discovered a middle-aged, scholarly man in white robes standing at the doorway. Xiao Ling almost ran into him. Behind the middle-aged man were Ming Dong and Yun Xiaoyan. "Why have you come here?" Xiao Ling wiped away her tears and asked in surprise. "How can I not worry when an uninvited guest barges into the Tianyuan clan and directly enters Sister Xiao Ling's room?" Ming Dong said from behind the middle-aged man. Suddenly he looked behind Xiao Ling. He looked at the black-robed Cheng Ming, who made his way over steadily, and he became stern. He said coldly, "Who are you? State your intentions." Seeing that the person who spoke was actually Ming Dong, Cheng Ming revealed a smear of surprise. He looked at Ming Dong deeply before pointing at Xiao Ling. "My master is her master. I've come under my master's orders to take her away." "Your master is Mo Tianyun?" Ming Dong's eyes narrowed. As soon as Mo Tianyun was mentioned, he could not help but become stern. He asked, "How can you prove it?" "I can prove it. The presence from this lock of hair belongs to my master. It's impossible for me to get my master's presence wrong. I want to see my master immediately," Xiao Ling said eagerly. Afterwards, she immediately ran past the middle-aged man and headed towards the people she was familiar with in the Tianyuan clan to bid farewell to them. "I wonder where Senior Mo Tianyun is and how I can find him. I'd like to visit him in person." Ming Dong also clasped his hands towards Cheng Ming after Xiao Ling left. Clearly, he believed this person slightly. He knew the old man before him had a very powerful cultivation such that the divine general beside him had to face him sternly. Experts like that would not lower themselves by lying. Ming Dong was filled with admiration towards Mo Tianyun. He came from the Tianyuan continent as well after all, so he had heard many rumors about Mo Tianyun. Mo Tianyun had been a great impact on him. "Please forgive me for being unable to answer your question. I can only pass on your message to Master," said Cheng Ming. Afterwards, Ming Dong tried to learn some things about Mo Tianyun from Cheng Ming again, but Cheng Ming kept his mouth shut tight, so Ming Dong failed to learn anything. As a matter of fact, Cheng Ming never even admitted that his master was the Mo Tianyun Ming Dong mentioned. He always referred to him as Master. "All right, let's go. I want to see my master quick." Very soon, Xiao Ling ran back with lightning speed. Her sudden departure had alarmed many important people of the Tianyuan clan. Not only had the greatest elder of the Tianyuan clan, Shiyu, personally come, but even Sacred Feather came. Cheng Ming nodded. Without saying anything more, he gently swung his sleeve and disappeared with Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin. "Who is he? Not only am I unable to sense his cultivation at all, but I also felt nothing when he barged into the Tianyuan clan," an old man behind Shiyu said in complete surprise after the two of them had vanished. He was a subject of the Shi Empire and an infinite prime. He had been specially sent by the Shi Emperor to protect Shiyu. He has already reached the peak of Chaotic Prime and is only a step away from Grand Prime. Naturally, you won't be able to sense him, said the middle-aged man who followed Ming Dong. What? Peak Chaotic Prime? All the upper echelon of the Tian Yuan clan paled in fright. They were utterly shocked. Uncle Ming, have you heard of the name Mo Tian Yun before? Ming Dong asked the divine general. The middle-aged man referred to as Uncle Ming shook his head. I've never heard of this name before. However, seeing how he can have a peak Chaotic Prime as a servant, he must be a Grand Prime and an extremely powerful one at that. Perhaps Mo Tian Yun is not his real name. He might have another name in the saints' world. Cheng Ming had already left the cloud plane with Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin. He hurried through outer space. He did not use any spaceships. Instead, he walked leisurely, like he was strolling through space. He moved extremely quickly, passing a world with each step. The stars around him changed rapidly, and in just a few steps, the tremendous cloud plane had become the size of a hand, hovering in outer space silently. I never thought the Grand Elder of the Empyrean Demon Cult and the War Demon, one of the 5 infamous generals, would actually come to the cloud plane personally. Since you've come, why leave in such a hurry? At this moment, cold laughter rang out in outer space. A huge cloud of demonic aura churned before Cheng Ming, giving off a terrifying, devastating presence. The heavenless demon exalt. Cheng Ming stopped. He glared at the cloud of demonic aura and called out as his face sank. Beside Cheng Ming, the war demon who accompanied him appeared. He stared at the churning black cloud sternly and growled, "This heavenless demon exalt has come with ill intentions. Grand Elder, you leave with them first. I'll cover you." Chapter 22:12. The Grand Elder's death. Cheng Ming became extremely stern. When he came here, he felt an ill foreboding. Now that the heavenless demon exalt had suddenly blocked his path, Cheng Ming sensed that the situation was bad. "I should remain behind and fight him to the death with you, but Master has ordered that I must take the girl back safely, so I can't let anything happen to her. War Demon, be careful. Remember, do not try to take him on forcefully, and you have to leave a fragment of your soul intact no matter what so that Master can revive you in the future," Cheng Ming warned before using a secret technique and charging off in the other direction as quickly as possible. Grand Elder, I've come especially for you, so how can you just turn around and leave without saying anything? Am I really that scary?" The heavenless demon exalt snickered. As he said that, a terrifying demonic aura erupted, causing space to crack and the stars around them to dim. It condensed into a huge hand that reached towards Cheng Ming. When the hand fell, endless energy surged out, sealing up the region and causing Cheng Ming to pause. At the same time, he slowed down as if some invisible energy had restrained him. War blood ignition. At this moment, the war demon bellowed out furiously. With a tremendous presence, he used a god-tier battle skill. All the vital energies within him rose, and a black flame sprang up on him as he directly hurled out a fist. This punch was astonishing, swinging out like it was unstoppable. It shattered the starry space, causing the galaxies to vanish. At the same time, Cheng Ming fought back with his full strength when he saw how the heavenless demon exalt had restrained him. He completely unleashed his strength as a peak Chaotic Prime and directly used a god-tier battle skill, employing his strongest attack at the hand condensed from demonic aura. Cheng Ming and the war demon's full-powered strikes struck the heavenless demon exalt's hand at basically the same time, erupting with a deafening boom. The clash this time was truly devastating. Regions of space collapsed one after another, truly being reduced to void. However, the difference in strength was still far too great. Not only did they fail to stop the heavenless demon exalt's seemingly casual strike with their full strength, but they also became heavily injured instead when the hand condensed from demonic aura struck them. Bang! The war demon was struck first. His entire body shattered, exploding into a bloody rain in outer space. His body was destroyed, and only a soul that did not shine particularly brightly was left behind. Cheng Ming's situation was not any better. The medium-quality god artifact armor he wore had dimmed while his face had completely paled. His entire right arm had vanished. Cheng Ming and the War Demon were only chaotic primes, while the Heavenless Demon Exalt was a fourth heavenly layer Grand Prime, a mid-Grand Prime. The difference in strength was simply too great such that they were on completely different levels. As a result, the battle became completely one-sided. Grand Elder, go! The War Demon called out miserably. His dim soul suddenly lit up brightly while all the blood scattered there was ignited in that instance as well. Black, demonic flames sprang up, gathering together from all directions and charging towards the Heavenless Demon Exalt fearlessly. Boom! Suddenly, a great sound rang out. The War Demon's soul and his blood all unleashed an astonishing might, surrounding the Heavenless Demon Exalt and blowing up. This time, no energy was released. Even the deafening boom only lasted for a single instance before vanishing. The scene the War Demon's self-destruction created was just too terrifying. A gaping, black hole formed in the space, there greedily devouring everything present. Whether it was light or energy, the black hole had devoured it all. War Demon! Cheng Ming called out sorrowfully. He looked at the small black hole in the distance as hatred filled his eyes. Afterwards, he turned around to leave, unwilling to waste any time at all. Your self-destruction is indeed powerful. It can probably injure first heavenly layer Grand Primes and threaten second heavenly layer Grand Primes, but to me, it's still far, far too weak, said the Heavenless Demon Exalt. He stood near the black hole, and he did not waver at all no matter how hard the hole sucked. Even his clothes did not flutter. He swung his hand gently and used his hand to rub space. As if the hole had experienced an unimaginable pressure, it collapsed loudly. Grand Elder, give me the method of how your Empyrean demon cult refines blood and soul beads. I'll let you go if you do, the Heavenless Demon Exalt said steadily. Having reached the fourth heavenly layer of Grand Prime, he was now the undisputed greatest expert on the cloud plane. He had completely stopped fearing the Great Elder behind the Empyrean demon cult. This was because in his eyes, the Great Elder was only a third heavenly layer Grand Prime at most. Even if he could make some progress and reach the fourth heavenly layer, he would only be at the same level as the Heavenless Demon Exalt. Moreover, there was another reason why he dared to attack the Empyrean demon cult. This reason was that he possessed reliable information that only the Great Elder was a Grand Prime in the Empyrean demon cult, while he, the Heavenless Demon Exalt, was not alone. He still had the Tian Empire behind him as well as the Peak clans that had banded together with the Tian Empire. His Tian clan had already gathered around half of the Peak powers across the cloud plane now. Heavenless Demon Exalt, you will suffer a horrible fate by opposing our Empyrean demon cult. Master will not spare you, Cheng Ming bellowed out furiously before directly fleeing into a spatial crack. If that's the case, die. As for your Great Elder, I'll naturally try him after we conquer the cloud plane. I'll get the method of refining blood and soul beads from him, the Heavenless Demon Exalt said coldly. A demonic presence wrapped around him, and he also entered the spatial crack, pointing at Cheng Ming who was fleeing for his life from afar. In the next moment, endless demonic aura suddenly surged out from around Cheng Ming. It wrapped around his body and were like maggots that devoured his flesh at a visible rate. There seemed to be a dense swarm of demonic insects in the demonic aura. I can't just let your body and soul go to waste like the war demons. They're perfect for feeding my demonic soul beetles, the Heavenless Demon Exalt smirked viciously. Heavenless Demon Exalt, just you wait for my master's wrath. Cheng Ming was not hesitant with his decision. Immediately, he abandoned his body and fled with his soul and a divine hull. The Heavenless Demon Exalt's eyes lit up slightly when he saw the divine hull Cheng Ming tried to take away with him. He smiled gently, you don't even want your space ring, yet you want the divine hull. It looks like the divine hull is extremely important to you. The Heavenless Demon Exalt extended his hand from afar. Demonic aura surged and formed a huge hand once again, destroying the spatial storms and streaks of energy along the way to grab Cheng Ming's soul in a brutal fashion. Afterwards, the hand closed slightly, and Cheng Ming's soul immediately began to collapse. It turned into specks of light in the spatial crack, gradually dispersing. The Heavenless Demon Exalt ignored Cheng Ming. In his eyes, Cheng Ming was already dead. He looked at the divine hall and showed interest. Afterwards, he used 2 fingers to pinch the fist-sized divine hall, and with a slight exertion of force, the divine hall immediately shattered, revealing Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling that Qing Ming had let in there. Who are you? Where's Grandpa Qing Ming? Xiao Ling looked at the heavenless demon Exalt who churned with demonic aura in confusion as she asked fearfully. She sensed a frightening presence from the heavenless demon Exalt. Xiao Jin also stood next to Xiao Ling uneasily. He looked at the heavenless demon Exalt closely and said nothing. The presence that the heavenless demon Exalt gave off terrified him. Looking at Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling, who had suddenly appeared before him with disappointing cultivation, the heavenless demon Exalt was clearly surprised. He felt very confused or even disbelief. The Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult did not even want his space ring, using all the power of his soul to flee with the divine hall. Clearly, the divine hall must have contained something extremely important. The heavenless demon Exalt even suspected that the Grand Elder had come to the cloud plane this time because of what was in the divine hall. However, why did 2 brats with an embarrassing level of cultivation appear before him? Has the Grand Elder come especially for the 2 of you? The heavenless demon Exalt sank into his thoughts. He became more and more certain before smiling coldly in the end. If that's the case, I'll keep the 2 of you for now. Maybe you'll be of great use in the future. With a wave of his hand, the heavenless demon Exalt disappeared from the spatial crack with Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling. Chapter 22:13. The Great Elder. After the heavenless demon Exalt departed, a weak speck of light suddenly appeared with an extremely weak mental pulse in the spatial crack. This was a fragment of the Grand Elder's soul. Although the heavenless demon Exalt had crushed Qing Ming's soul, causing it to disperse and vanish in the chaotic spatial crack, Qing Ming did not truly die. He used a secret technique from his master to save a fragment of his soul. With a flash, the fragment of Qing Ming's soul vanished. The white-robed, sagely lord of the Heaven's Link Peak and 6 other people of various ages currently sat around an extremely precious table made from white jade on the top of Heaven's Link Peak. He discussed the plans to fend off the Tian Empire with them. The 6 people who sat on the same table as the Lord concealed their presence, without letting any of it leak out. As such, they seemed just like ordinary people. However, they were actually peak experts who stood at the apex of the cloud plane. They were terrifying figures where the entire cloud plane would shake if they stamped their feet. The heavenless demon Exalt has already killed the Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult as well as the war demon of the 5 generals. It looks like the heavenless demon Exalt is confident in dealing with the Great Elder who rarely shows himself, said an extremely ordinary old man. His was extremely old, where his back was hunched and his face was filled with wrinkles. He seemed like he was about to pass away from old age. This old man was the ancestor of the Tong family, one of the peak clans of the Cloud Plane. He was Tong Wuming. The more powerful the heavenless demon Exalt is, the worse our position is. He does not fear the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult, which is not good news for us, said a middle-aged man in green clothes. He had a resolute face. He was the ancestor of the God's Fallen clan, Luo Mantian. The God's Fallen clan was also one of the peak organizations of the Cloud Plane. They were located in the northern region. In my opinion, this is the heavenless demon Exalt showing off his strength to us. He has killed the Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult with lightning speed, showing us his strength through how he does not fear the Empyrean demon cult at all. He's warning us to not put up feudal resistance, growled another old man. His complexion was not fantastic. He was the ancestors of the Fire God clan, Lian Wuji. Peak Lord, may I ask how confident you are in defeating the heavenless demon Exalt? The founding ancestor of the cosmic sect, Zhou Zhidao, asked. All the people seated there looked at the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak after hearing Zhou Zhidao's question. The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak was a peak 3rd heavenly layer Grand Prime. He used to hold the position of the most powerful on the Cloud Plane. He was a prestigious person on the Cloud Plane whom many peak clans respected. On the current Cloud Plane, if there was someone who had the right to put up a fight against the heavenless demon Exalt, it would definitely be the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. This was because all the other grand primes on the cloud plane were at the first or second heavenly layers. Their strength differed from the fourth heavenly layer heavenless demon Exalt by far too much. The eyes of the Peak Lord had always remained fixated on outer space, where the Grand Elder and the heavenless demon Exalt fought. It was extremely distant from the cloud plane, so distant that even the tremendous cloud plane would seem like a hand-sized piece of land floating in space. It had surpassed the range that chaotic primes could sense. Only grand primes could observe everything that happened there. A strange light flickered through the Peak Lord's eyes. He said, "I have complete confidence in defeating him when we were at the same level of cultivation, but now that he has reached the fourth heavenly layer before me, there's no chance for me to defeat him when I meet him next time. I can only keep him busy for a while at most, but I will still suffer defeat once it gets drawn out." Then what should we do? The Tian Empire already possesses 3 grand primes. They also have some peak clans who stand with them. In terms of peak experts, we're completely outmatched in terms of numbers. And once you throw the heavenless demon Exalt into the equation, Sai, the founding ancestor of the cosmic sect, Zhou Zhidao, let out a long sigh. He was worried. Apart from the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak, all the ancestors who gathered there had heavy hearts. The situation before them was not optimistic. Do we really have to yield to them? Do we really have to follow them in the future? Luo Mantian of the Gods Fallen clan sighed gently. All the people present were experts who reigned over an entire region. They had grown accustomed to being able to order people after spending so much time in a position of power. Now that they had to serve someone else, they all struggled to accept it. On the other hand, the Peak Lord remained calm. He said, "You don't need to worry. There's no need for us to worry about the heavenless demon Exalt anymore." "Why do you say that, Peak Lord?" The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak pointed at outer space, where the heavenless demon Exalt had stopped the Grand Elder. The heavenless demon Exalt has completely offended the Empyrean demon cult now. Moreover, he seems to have taken something extremely important from the hands of the Grand Elder. I believe that before long, the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult will come to the cloud plane in person. Can the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult stop the heavenless demon Exalt? The eyes of all the peak experts there narrowed. The Lord of Heaven's Link Peak seemed to think of someone that he had personally witnessed in the past from that. Immediately, fear flooded his eyes, and he said, "You underestimate the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult far too much. He's far more terrifying than you imagine him to be. Since the heavenless demon Exalt has offended the Great Elder, his fate has become determined. The priority for us right now is to stop the advances of the Tian Empire before the Great Elder arrives. But just in case, I'd recommend everyone to have some clansmen retreat from the cloud plane so that you have some survivors if anything goes bad. If that's the case, I'll go back and arrange it immediately. We will formally come into conflict with the Tian clan very soon, so we don't have much time left. I hope that the mysterious Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult can make it in time." In an unknown space of the Saints' world, the soul fragment of the Grand Elder entered a majestic divine hall with a flash. "Master!" Very soon, Qingming's soul fragment arrived before a closed secret room. He turned into a fist-sized figure and knelt before the room as he trembled. "What has happened?" A serious voice rang out from the secret room. "We were attacked by the heavenless demon Exalt." Qingming gave a simple explanation of what happened. Rumble. The door to the secret room opened slowly, and immediately, a cold power of slaughter radiated out. A black-robed, middle-aged man with a striking appearance walked out. His face was sunken. He stared at Qingming's soul fragment sharply and growled, "What about the person I got you to bring?" "She has been taken by the heavenless demon Exalt," Qingming said fearfully. "The heavenless demon Exalt." In that instance, the middle-aged man's gaze became extremely terrifying and shocking. Killing intent radiated from him, and even his eyes became bloodshot from bloodlust. At that moment, he seemed to have become a bloodthirsty beast. Qingming, who knelt in the air as a soul fragment, became filled with fear and unease. He had followed his master for so many years, but he had never seen his master so angered. "I can't wait any longer. My original body has to break free immediately. The middle-aged man's face was sunken. He let Qingming leave to rebuild his body before turning around and entering the secret room again. The door closed once more. At the same time, there was a barren planet of deathly silence in an extremely distant region of space. A middle-aged man who seemed exactly the same as the master Qingming spoke of sat underground in white robes. Suddenly, the person's eyes snapped open, and intense killing intent flashed through them. Then he took a step and vanished immediately. When he appeared once again, he was in outer space. He closed his eyes and sensed for something silently before shooting off in a certain direction. Chapter 22:14. Hallowed Saint Masters Jian Chen had already arrived on the desolate plain now. Currently, he was in a luxurious inn within the central region. He had ordered some dishes and ate by himself. Many people ate in the inn. They enjoyed their alcohol as they discussed with one another loudly in great interest. They talked about the various interesting matters that had occurred on the desolate plain as well as various rumors that they had heard. Jian Chen had already gained a rough understanding of the desolate plain from Xianming. However, it had already been far too long since Xianming had returned to the desolate plain, so he only learnt about some very old matters from Xianming. As a result, Jian Chen needed to acquire some new knowledge about the current desolate plain. After all, he did not plan on staying here for just a few days. If nothing went wrong, he would be on the desolate plain for quite a long time. In 3 years, the Radiant Saint Hall will select a new chosen saint. I wonder who will become the chosen saint this time. It's said that there are 5 geniuses with 9-star talent in the Radiant Saint Hall right now. 3 of them have gone from being a Class 1 Radiant Saint Master to Class 9 in just 1,000 years. It's said that they're all trying to comprehend the second law of being a Radiant Saint Master, the laws of the hallowed, to become a hallowed Saint Master. It shouldn't take long for them to become extremely powerful hallowed Saint Masters. Hallowed Saint Masters are existences with extremely great battle prowess. They rarely have any opponents at the same level of cultivation. Only those supreme prodigies raised by great organizations have the right to rival them. The heavens are fair. Even though hallowed Saint Masters have very powerful battle prowess, there's a price for them to pay as well, and that's the great difficulty in making any progress. How long do you think the 3 9-star geniuses who reached Class 9 in just a millennia will take before they comprehend the second law of Radiant Saint Masters and become a hallowed Saint Master? At this moment, the discussion to one side raised Jian Chen's attention. He turned his head slightly and glanced at them very casually. They were a group of young people in white robes, which he identified to be Radiant Saint Masters with a single glance. They discussed the matters of Radiant Saint Masters enthusiastically. Jian Chen was not unfamiliar with the chosen saint and 9-star geniuses. He had already understood it from Xianming. The chosen saint was the most outstanding person selected from all the Radiant Saint Masters of the Radiant Saint Hall through various means of elimination and selection. This person would then be raised into the leader of the younger generation with the most authority. Moreover, they would have all the resources and the full support of the Radiant Saint Hall. Once a chosen saint was selected, they would be an existence that stood above almost everyone in the Radiant Saint Hall. Not only would they be a representation of status and authority, but they would also have an exceptional future paved for them, possessing extremely great room for growth and future glory. However, it would be extremely difficult to become the chosen saint. In the past, even with Xianming's talent, he had no right to be chosen. As for the 9-star geniuses, it was a form of measurement for the talent of Radiant Saint Masters. Every single person who could be called a genius possessed extraordinary talent. They would be a 1-star genius at the very least, and it could range to as high as a 9-star genius. Even 1-star geniuses would have a certain amount of status in the Radiant Saint Hall. They would receive superior treatment, which could not be compared to regular disciples. As for hallowed Saint Masters, they were like Xianming, who had grasped the trick to change Radiant Saint Force. As a result, not only did it possess healing qualities, but it also possessed great offensive power. Right now, Jian Chen was only a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master at most. He was not a hallowed Saint Master. After remaining there for a little longer, Jian Chen realized that he could not obtain any more useful information. As such, he left some high-grade divine crystals and left the inn. He had a basic understanding of the desolate plains situation. It was also split into 5 major regions, and the Radiant Saint Hall resided in the central region. It was not far from where he was right now. Jian Chen directly made his way to the Radiant Saint Hall. He discovered many wanted posters stuck around the streets. Unsurprisingly, he was there. However, the person who had published them was only the solitary sword ancestor. The Azure Pern King's wanted posters did not seem to reach the desolate plain yet. Apart from him, there was also a young man who was wanted. His image was stuck all over the streets and alleyways. The young man was called Qing Shan. He was handsome and only seemed to be 25 or 26. The people who had published the posters were the Radiant Saint Hall. Qing Shan comes from the martial Soul Mountain, ranked first on the God King's throne. Jian Chen's gaze darkened when he saw Qing Shan's introduction. When he had just come to the desolate plain, he had already heard of the martial soul lineage. They were hostile to the Radiant Saint Hall, where the two of them were basically arch-enemies. The reason why Qing Shan was wanted by the Radiant Saint Hall was because he killed a hallowed Saint Master who had condensed a soul tree from the Radiant Saint Hall. The cultivation system of Radiant Saint Masters was different from fighters. Hallowed Saint Masters who had condensed soul trees were akin to primordial realm experts. There are rarely any opponents of Hallowed Saint Masters at the same level of cultivation as them, yet a Hallowed Saint Master who has condensed a soul tree and reached the primordial realm was slain by Qing Shan, a mere God King. Qing Shan truly deserves the position of first on the God King's throne, Jian Chen thought. He could not help but compare Qing Shan to Shui Yunlan. Shui Yunlan was also known to be invincible among God Kings. Her strength had been fully revealed in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Jian Chen stopped when he passed by the center of the city. He stared ahead. There was a flight of stairs completely constructed from sword qi. It led towards the sky, heading into the depths of the clouds. Quite a few people had gathered at the bottom of the sword qi stairs. From time to time, a few young prodigies would step onto the stairs with determination and burning desire, doing everything they could to reach the end. The stairs formed from sword qi were known as the Path of Swords. It was rumored that the Path of Swords had already existed on the desolate plain for hundreds of thousand years. It was so well known that its name was not restricted to the desolate plain. It had even spread to other plains. This was because the Path of Swords was a test personally set down by the Celestial Sword Saint. It was once said that someone made it to the end of the Path of Swords, they would have the right to be accepted as the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple. The Celestial Sword Saint was referred to people as a saint on the desolate plain, so his strength was evident. Jian Chen stopped before the Path of Swords for a very long time. He silently sensed the incredible sword intent that radiated from the stairs before leaving in the end. Before long, he arrived at the Radiant Saint Hall. "I want to join the Radiant Saint Hall." Jian Chen directly stated his intentions. Chapter 22:15. One-star genius. This was only a branch of the Radiant Saint Hall. The people responsible for recording down the new disciples were a few women in white clothes with a special badge from the Radiant Saint Hall. The women did not seem old. From their appearances alone, the youngest seemed to be 16 or 17, while the oldest were only in their early 20s. They were all pretty, which was pleasant to the eye. Of course, who knows how long they had actually cultivated for already. This is a testing medallion. Record the information about your identity onto your testing medallion, and then go get tested with the medallion. The person who received Jian Chen was a young woman who seemed to be 17 or 18. She took out a medallion that was 3 fingers wide with great familiarity and passed it to Jian Chen. The medallion was created from jade. Not only was it tough, but it could also store information. Things could be recorded in there through the soul. Jian Chen took his medallion and directly made his way to the testing grounds. When he arrived at the testing grounds, over 100 Radiant Saint Masters were already scattered there. They were either nervous and unsettled or waiting eagerly as they rubbed their hands. They all looked at a white, jade pillar up ahead with varying gazes. The jade pillar was 100 feet high and as thick as a water tank. It was covered with inscriptions. Who knew how many formations were engraved on it? The jade pillar seemed like just a supporting body for the formations. The jade pillar was especially used to test the talent of Radiant Saint Masters. This was an important process that all people who wanted to join the Radiant Saint Hall had to go through. It had a direct correlation to their future. This was because greater talent discovered through the tests meant that the status enjoyed after joining the Radiant Saint Hall would be greater as well. A good starting point meant more room for growth in the future. Jiang Cheng, mid-grade talent; Phineas, low-grade talent; Dracula, low-grade talent; Xen Jiang, high-grade talent. As the white pillar constantly flickered with a light of varying brightness, the old man responsible for the testing constantly called out their level of talent. Jianchen discovered from close observation that lighting up 30 feet or less of the pillar was low-grade talent, while beyond that was mid-grade talent. If someone could exceed 60 feet, it would be high-grade talent. Most of the people here possessed low or mid-grade talent. Very few of the people present had high-grade talent. But at this moment, the white pillars suddenly began to shine with blinding light. The dazzling light on the pillar reached 9 feet in a single instance before rising by another foot before stopping. In the end, the light stopped at 91 feet, and it no longer shone with just white. It had become multicolored. A one-star genius. It's actually a female genius, cries immediately rang out. The people gathered there all showed envy. Jian Chen also looked over and discovered a pretty woman who seemed to be in her 20s standing before the white pillar. Her facial features were delicate, and she was beautiful. Her large, onyx-like eyes blinked constantly as if they were trying to say something. She wore white robes, which indicated that she was a Radiant Saint Master. She looked at the top of the white pillar, at the light that had only reached 91 feet. She frowned slightly as if she was rather dissatisfied with the result. Baiyu, one-star genius. The old man who was responsible for the testing finally smiled. He nodded at Baiyu amiably and said, "Baiyu, congratulations. From today onwards, you are a one-star genius of our Radiant Saint Hall." Afterwards, Baiyu was taken away by an envoy in black clothes. As long as a prodigious talent was found, even if they were only the lower, one-star geniuses, their treatment would differ drastically from ordinary disciples. Ordinary disciples, even those with high-grade talent, all had to wait here after the testing. Only star geniuses would be immediately taken to the Radiant Saint Hall by envoys. Afterwards, the testing continued. After testing over a dozen people, the white pillar finally shone brightly once again. The intense white light rose even faster than when Baiyu was being tested. It basically reached a height of 90 feet in a single instance, turning it multicolored. The light did not just stop at 91 feet like during Baiyu's testing. It passed 91 feet very soon and approached the 92nd feet. In the end, the colorful light stopped at 95 feet. It was close to the 96th feet. A 5-star genius. It's actually a 5-star genius. This time, the old man could not help but cry out in excitement. Whether it was the ordinary disciples waiting to one side or the Radiant Saint Masters waiting to be tested, they all looked at the 5-star genius with envy. There were even quite a few women among them who revealed great, undisguised admiration. Even Jianchen could not help but glance over curiously. It was an extremely handsome young man around the same age as him. He had already lifted his hand away from the jade pillar, and he stood confidently with his hands behind his back. He was proud of himself. Zhuo Feng, 5-star genius. After sucking in a deep breath, the old man announced excitedly. Afterwards, another black-clothed envoy took Zhuo Feng away extremely politely. A while later after Zhuo Feng, it was finally Jian Chen's turn. Jian Chen walked over eagerly. He passed his medallion to the old man and looked at the white pillar calmly. "You're called Chang Yang, right? Place your hand on the testing stone, and then condense Radiant Saint Force with all your efforts. You don't need to worry about your class as a Radiant Saint Master affecting the testing stone. The testing stone only tests a person's talent. It has nothing to do with one's cultivation level," explained the old man. "Thank you for telling me, Senior. Junior understands. Jian-Chen clasped his fist at the old man before looking at the white pillar. After a period of silence, he gently pressed his hand onto the jade pillar and began to condense radiant saint force slowly. Immediately, white light began to rise up from the base of the pillar. It did not move very quickly. Instead, it advanced at an extremely steady pace. It passed by 30 feet and 60 feet very soon. In the end, the radiant saint force Jian-Chen had condensed made the light reach 91 feet. A one-star genius should be about enough. Jian-Chen paid attention to the light on the pillar at all times. After stabilizing it at 91 feet, he acted like he was out of power and stopped. This was not Jian-Chen's limit. He had purposefully suppressed himself during the testing and stopped after reaching the level of a one-star genius. He understood that his identity was sensitive, so he could not simply show off in the Radiant Saint Hall and attract too much attention. He only needed to establish an identity that was enough to cultivate in the Radiant Saint Hall. The identity of a one-star genius just happened to be around average in the Radiant Saint Hall. It could fulfill his needs without attracting too much attention. Chang Yang, one-star genius, the old man announced in high spirits. He had discovered 3-star genius in a single stroke. It was quite the merit for him. Afterwards, Jian-Chen was also taken away by a black-clothed envoy to the Radiant Saint Hall. Chapter 22:16. One-colored soul core. A layer of milky white light from the envoy surrounded Jian-Chen. Afterwards, he was taken away from the city at the envoy's full speed, which also happened to be extremely slow in Jian-Chen's eyes. The black-clothed envoy was clearly a hallowed saint master. He was cool, expressionless, and silent. He did not talk to Jian-Chen at all, only focusing on the journey. Jian-Chen said nothing as well. He had closed his eyes now, silently sensing the envoy's usage and grasp over radiant saint force to comprehend the wonders within it. The envoy's cultivation was only equivalent to an early overgod. In the eyes of someone who could kill primordial realm experts like Jian-Chen, such cultivation was basically as insignificant as an ant. However, the envoy's achievements with Radiant Saint Force could not be compared to Jian-Chen's, who had only reached Class 9 as a Radiant Saint Master. As a result, Jian-Chen had many things he could learn from the envoy. Very soon, Jian-Chen completely submerged himself in the comprehension of Radiant Saint Force. He was an expert who could fight someone at the primordial realm after all, so he possessed a rich foundation. His Radiant Saint Force remained at Class 9 and never broke through because he never found a path to continue. Now, he was able to comprehend the envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force at such proximity, so it was like seeing a lighthouse within the dark night. He instantly found his path. Suddenly, dazzling, milky white light flickered around Jian-Chen. The light shone brighter and brighter, becoming like the sun in the sky. It enveloped Jian-Chen completely. At the same time, strands of extremely pure radiant saint force and origin energy gathered in from all directions, forming a swirl of energy that only radiant saint masters could sense above Jian-Chen's head. Like a whale taking in water, he completely absorbed all the radiant saint force and origin energy that gathered above him. The soul core in Jian-Chen's head that had been completely condensed from radiant saint force and origin energy, representing him as a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master, revolved rapidly. It grew at a terrifying rate, undergoing a qualitative transformation. In the end, the pure white soul core became scarlet. It hovered in Jian-Chen's head quietly as it shone with faint red light. It seemed like a scarlet flower. You've actually broken through at a time like this. It looks like your talent is pretty impressive. The envoy glanced at Jian-Chen and sighed in surprise. But clearly, even when Jian-Chen broke through, his strength was still on a completely different level compared to the envoy's. As a result, his breakthrough did not raise too much of the envoy's attention. The question was, would the envoy still be able to remain as composed as he was right now when he found out Jian-Chen that was an expert who could kill primordial realm experts? The 7 colors of the soul core are equivalent to the 3 levels of the origin realm and the 4 levels of godhood. My soul core is scarlet right now, which means I've formally advanced from Class 9 to Class 10 as a Radiant Saint Master, thought Jian-Chen. He had never thought he would make a breakthrough before he had even arrived at the Radiant Saint Master. Moreover, he had broken through without a cultivation method, finding his direction completely through the envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force. He could not help but become eager. He had no idea what impressive cultivation method he could obtain from the Radiant Saint Hall and how his cultivation as a Radiant Saint Force would advance at an astonishing rate. After all, he was different from others. On the surface, he was only a Radiant Saint Master who had just made it to Class 10, but in reality, he was also a fighter with a powerful soul. We're here. This is the Radiant Saint Hall. At this moment, the envoy said to Jianchen. Jianchen looked over with that. He discovered he had arrived amidst a mountain range that was extremely abundant in Radiant Saint Force. Stone huts or dwellings could be seen everywhere as white-robed Radiant Saint Masters moved about all over the place. They flew in the sky, wrapped around by a dense layer of white light. They seemed to possess the slight bearing of an immortal. Jianchen only glanced at the landscape around him casually before suddenly raising his head and looking up ahead. He could see that a colossal divine hall stood amongst the clouds 1,000,000 kilometers away. It shone with dazzling, pure white light that illuminated the surroundings and enveloped the endless mountains. The entire divine hall seemed extremely holy. It gave off a sacred presence, which would make people feel reverence towards it. We're in the exterior mountains of the Radiant Saint Hall. The disciples of weaker strength and talent gather here. You're a one-star genius, so you have the right to directly enter the interior mountains and take a Radiant God King as a teacher. Each Radiant God King is referred to as Protector in our Radiant Saint Hall. In the past decade, Protector Han has been responsible for all the new starred disciples. I'll take you to Protector Han's territory. You can cultivate under his tutelage from today onwards. If you are outstanding, maybe you'll gain the right to enter the Sacred Hall, the envoy explained to Jianchen. As soon as he mentioned the Sacred Hall, he could not help but show anticipation. The envoy brought Jianchen to one of the peak of the interior mountain before leaving by himself. Jianchen discovered that aside from himself, there were 2 other people waiting there. He was familiar with the 2 of them. They were the 2 other star geniuses who had entered the Radiant Saint Hall with him. They were the 1-star genius Bai Yu and the 5-star genius Zhuofeng. You're a star genius as well? Can you tell me how many stars you have? Jianchen's arrival immediately attracted Bai Yu and Zhuofeng's gazes. Bai Yu looked at Jianchen as she blinked with her large eyes as she asked him curiously. I barely just made it into the ranks of the 1-star geniuses. Jianchen showed off his token of authority and said indifferently, How many colors does your soul core have? Zhuofeng asked with undisguised arrogance as if he was superior to Jianchen. There were no Class 10 or Class 11 in the Saints' world. Cultivation level was determined by the colors of the soul core. I only just condensed the first color. Jianchen ignored Zhuofeng's attitude and said indifferently. He was not a fighter anymore. He was just a weak Radiant Saint Master. You've only condensed the first color? Then I'm stronger than you. I've already condensed the second color. Senior Zhuofeng is the most powerful. He has already reached the peak of the 3-colored soul core. If no accidents happen, Senior Zhuofeng should be our first senior brother, while I will be the second senior sister. As for you, you'll be our little junior brother. Little junior brother, what's your name? Oh right, quickly greet me as your senior sister. Bai Yu was especially active and open. She giggled at Jianchen. As for Zhuofeng, he could not help but begin looking down on Jianchen after he heard that Jianchen only had a 1-colored soul core. Chapter 22:17. The Celestial Sword. Saint Jianchen looked at Bai Yu rather speechlessly. He said, Do you really want to be the senior this much? And isn't it too soon for you to decide that you're my senior? Bai Yu rolled her eyes as she said rather complacently, It's not me who wants to be your senior. Who can help the fact that I'm stronger than you? That's why I can only just accept you as my little junior brother. Junior, why don't you call me your senior sooner? If you make me your senior happy, I'll protect you in the future. Once someone bullies you, feel free to come to find your senior sister. Bai Yu purposefully acted gallantly at the end. However, when she tried to give off a bearing like that, Jianchen saw nothing close to it. Jianchen burst into laughter. Did he still need the protection of a radiant Saint Master who was only at returnance? Of course, if even Senior Sister can't stop the powerful opponent, there's still First Senior Brother. Isn't that right, Senior Zhuofeng? Junior Sister is right. If there are any ignorant bastards who offends Junior Sister in the future, feel free to come to find me. I'll stand forward for you. Zhuofeng revealed a radiant smile on his handsome face as he looked at Bai Yu amiably. However, Zhuofeng did not even glance at Jian Chen as if he did not take him seriously at all. Zhuofeng, Bai Yu, Changyang, come to the top of the mountain immediately. At this moment, a heavy voice boomed out from the sky. Jian Chen, Bai Yu, and Zhuofeng all looked at the top of the mountain when they heard that. They all understood that the owner of the voice was extremely likely to be their teacher. Bai Yu and Zhuofeng immediately became prudent. A radiant God King could still strike a certain amount of awe in them. Bai Yu and Zhuofeng immediately dared not tarry. They both condensed radiant saint force and flew towards the top of the mountain peak as soon as they heard the voice. However, as soon as they tried to condense radiant saint force, they discovered in surprise that an invisible force bound their bodies. They were unable to fly at all. However, the two of them soon realized that this was probably a test from their future teacher. Immediately, they made up their minds and ran towards the top of the mountain. Jian Chen remained completely calm. He stared at the mountaintop for a while before chasing behind Bai Yu and Zhuofeng with a single movement. He followed behind them steadily, hurrying towards the top of the mountain. At the same time, in the vast outer space beyond the desolate plain, a streak of azure light shot through deep space with unbelievable speed. Unsurprisingly, the streak of light headed straight for the huge piece of land floating in space. In the end, the azure streak of light did not enter the boundary of the desolate plain. It stopped outside the desolate plain in the sea of stars and turned into a man in azure clothes. The man was the infamous heavenly king of azure brilliance of the saints' world, the Azure Peng King. He's actually on the desolate plain. The Azure Peng King hovered in outer space with his presence concealed. He stared at the desolate plain and frowned. I can't wait any longer. The solitary sword ancestor is about to come. I have to get the Eneta Tower from Jianchen before the solitary sword ancestor no matter what, even if I have to pay a certain price, thought the Azure Peng King. He made up his mind and carefully concealed his presence, approaching the desolate plain silently with an extremely low profile. Piss off! However, a voice boomed out in outer space at this moment. In the next moment, extremely powerful laws of the sword condensed in outer space, and in a single instance, it formed a colossal strand of sword chi in the sea of stars. The sword chi was over 100,000 kilometers long. It was truly colossal. From afar, it hung in the sky like a resplendent galaxy, shining with dazzling and blinding light, illuminating outer space before directly chopping towards the Azure Peng King. Under the slash of the sword chi, the sky full of starlight twisted as if countless stars had fallen out from space. The terrifying sword chi split space into two. It was horrifying. The Azure Peng King's expression changed. He did not receive the strike forcefully. Instead, he flickered with azure light and unleashed his great speed, turning into a blur that retreated to 10 million kilometers away to avoid the attack. Celestial Sword Saint, I don't wish to have conflict with you. The murderer of my disciple is on the desolate plain right now. I only want to capture the murderer of my beloved disciple. I hope you don't interfere, the Azure Peng King said coldly with a sunken face. I don't care about your reason. If you want to step on the desolate plain, feel free to try it. The Celestial Sword Saint's voice rang out from the sea of stars. It was cold and filled with killing intent. The Azure Peng King hovered in the distant space and stared at the desolate plain uneasily. However, he still did not take that step in the end. Before long, the space beside the Azure Peng King suddenly twisted. A huge crack suddenly appeared, and the solitary sword ancestor with a sword on his back charged out from the crack while seated on his meteor. The huge meteor stopped near the Azure Peng King. The solitary sword ancestor stared at the desolate plain before standing up and clasping his fist in the direction of the desolate plain. Celestial Sword Saint, long time no see. How have you been? Solitary Sword, you've actually come as well. You can come over, but that bluebird brain is forbidden from setting foot on the desolate plain, said the celestial sword saint. He spoke brutally, showing no respect to the Azure King. Having been called a bluebird brain despite being the heavenly king of azure brilliance, the Azure King's face immediately paled in anger and sank in a terrifying manner. The solitary sword ancestor clasped his fist at the celestial sword saint again. After exchanging pleasantries, he took a step away from his meteor and entered the desolate plain. But at this moment, the solitary sword ancestor's expression changed. Suddenly, he looked behind him. A white-robed, middle-aged man strode over through the vast sea of stars. He crossed an extremely great distance with each step, directly making his way towards the solitary sword ancestor. In just a few seconds, the middle-aged man arrived a few kilometers away from the solitary sword ancestor. "You seem to have come for me specially? Are you looking for me for something particular?" The solitary sword ancestor stopped and looked back at the white-robed man. He frowned slightly. The Azure King also noticed the middle-aged man, but he only glanced at him before losing interest because the middle-aged man was just too weak. He did not raise the Azure King's attention at all. "I heard you issued a bounty for Jianqin everywhere?" The middle-aged man looked at the solitary sword ancestor calmly and said with great composure, "The only successor of my solitary sword lineage was killed by Jianqin," growled the solitary sword ancestor. "There are two reasons why I'm looking for you. The first is that I hope you can give up on the bounty and your hunt for Jianqin," said the middle-aged man. He remained calm the entire time. The Azure King became angered when he heard that. However, he did not act up on the spot. He could tell that the middle-aged man was not as simple as he seemed, so he turned towards the solitary sword ancestor and said to him secretly, "Who is this person? He's a mere 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, yet he dares to talk to you like that? Do not underestimate him. He's not someone that should be provoked. What you see right now is only a clone of his," the solitary sword ancestor replied sternly. Chapter 22:18. Second senior brother. The Azure King's face immediately sank from the solitary sword ancestor's cautious warning. The solitary sword ancestor had revealed one fact to him without any doubt. The middle-aged man, who was only a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, possessed an extremely powerful original body. Even a peak expert as powerful as the solitary sword ancestor had to act cautiously. Originally, the middle-aged man had nothing to do with him, the Azure King, but he just happened to want to protect Jianqin, who the Azure King wanted to kill. It immediately made the Azure King's expression become rather ugly. The solitary sword ancestor fell silent when he heard the middle-aged man's words. He looked at the white-robed, determined man indifferently and only said after quite a while, "You know just how difficult it is to find a suitable successor for my solitary sword ancestor. Gong Zheng was the only person I managed to find in the vast saint's world after so much difficulty, but in the end, he was slain by Jianqin in the Neptunian Divine Palace before he could fully mature and spread his wings. If you want to protect Jianqin, how will I be able to explain this to the past generations of my solitary sword lineage?" The white-robed man smiled indifferently. "Finding a suitable successor might be an extremely arduous matter to you, but it's nothing for me." The solitary sword ancestor's eyes narrowed when he heard that. Immediately, he stared at the middle-aged man with brimming interest and asked eagerly, "Are you willing to find suitable successors for me?" The middle-aged man nodded. "It's not a matter of finding suitable successors. It's I've already found suitable successors. There are 3 juniors with great talent who are extremely suitable to become successors of your solitary sword lineage." 3? Really? The solitary sword ancestor's face lit up and his eyes shone. "You know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Solitary sword, I'll use these 3 successors to exchange for your bounty on Jianqin. Moreover, you cannot target Jianqin in the future anymore. Do you agree?" The middle-aged man said indifferently, "Alright, I agree. If the 3 of them become successors to my solitary sword lineage, not only will I stop targeting Jianqin, but I'll even owe you a huge favor," the solitary sword ancestor said loudly. Jubilation filled his voice. It was extremely difficult for his solitary sword lineage to find successors. Even during its most glorious time, there were no more than 10 successors. In his generation, there had only been a single successor, Gong Zheng. As a result, the solitary sword ancestor was naturally overjoyed when he suddenly heard news of 3 successors. You said there are 2 reasons why you're looking for me. What's the second reason? The solitary sword ancestor asked. I want you to take action personally, said the middle-aged man. You want me to take action? The solitary sword ancestor was surprised. The middle-aged man sank into his thoughts for a while before telling the solitary sword ancestor secretly, My original body is trapped. I need you to take action and destroy a seal. The solitary sword ancestor immediately became stern. He glanced at the middle-aged man with his eyes that had seen many aspects of life and thought for a very long time before nodding slowly. Seeing the solitary sword ancestor agree, the middle-aged man's face did not change at all. He remained calm and composed the entire time. A shard of jade directly shot into the solitary sword ancestor's hand, and the middle-aged man said, Here is the location of your 3 successors. Afterwards, the middle-aged man no longer remained there. He took a step and left, entering the desolate plain with composure. He did not even glance at the Azure Peng King as if he was nothing. Solitary sword, who is he? The Azure Peng King arrived before the solitary sword ancestor in a flash and asked with a sunken face after the middle-aged man had left. The solitary sword ancestor shook his head gently. He did not seem to be willing to talk about the middle-aged man's identity. However, he did open his mouth, tempted to warn the Azure Peng King to give up on his hunt for Jianqin, but as soon as he was going to say it, he remembered the Azure Peng King's nature. He knew that even if he warned the Azure Peng King, it would not change his mind, so he said nothing in the end. He took the shard of jade with the location of the 3 successors and left eagerly in excitement and anticipation. Seeing the solitary sword ancestor leave, the Azure Peng King became uneasy. He looked at the huge desolate plain that hovered in space, and the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. In the end, he was still unwilling to just watch Jianqin hide on the desolate plain safely. He called out, Celestial Sword Saint, the grievances of the past are in the past. It has already been so many years, so why must you cling on to them? If you give me just 2 hours on the desolate plain, I will definitely give you a great remuneration. Haha, in terms of vengefulness, how many people can match up to you, Azure Bird Brain, in the entire Saints world? It's still the same as before. If you want to step onto the desolate plain, feel free to try it, the Celestial Sword Saint replied with a provocation and threat. He did not appear, but his voice boomed through outer space like a great bell. The Azure Peng King's face paled in anger. He glanced in the direction of the desolate plain icily and snorted coldly before turning around and leaving. However, he did not go far away. Instead, he sat down on a meteor in the distant space, observing Jianqin from far away. Jianqin, I'd like to see how long you can remain on the desolate plain, the Azure Peng King thought as he looked at the fingernail-sized land in the distance. Jianqin, Baiyu, and Zhuofeng currently unleashed their full might in the Radiant Saint Hall, running towards the top of the mountain crazily. They moved extremely quickly, just like 3 streaks of white light that vanished through the forest in a flash. Out of the 3 of them, Zhuofeng was the strongest, possessing a 3-colored soul core. His entire body bathed in milky white radiant saint force as he ran at the front. Following him was Baiyu with her 2-colored soul core, while Jianqin was last. In reality, Jianqin could completely break free from the restraints of the mysterious power with his current cultivation and reach the top of the mountain in a single step. However, his status now was only a Radiant Saint Master who had just condensed a 1-colored soul core, so the strength he could display was completely restricted to that. However, even with that being the case, the strength he displayed could not be compared to the Radiant Saint force from a 1-colored soul core. As they sprinted, he gradually inched closer to Baiyu. And this was Jianqin holding back, unwilling to stand out. Otherwise, he could easily surpass Baiyu and Zhuofeng. In the end, Zhuofeng reached the mountaintop first. Jianqin, on the other hand, sped up slightly at the final juncture, allowing him to be one step faster than Bai Yu to claim second. It also made Bai Yu, who was originally second, end up last as third place. Little junior brother, I couldn't tell that you were actually even faster than senior sister. Bai Yu looked at Jian Chen as she breathed rather heavily. Very good. Since everyone is here, I formally announce that Zhou Feng, Chang Yang, and Bai Yu will be the students of I, Han Xin. In the future, I'll be responsible for guiding you on the path of cultivation as a radiant Saint Master. A white-robed middle-aged man stood before the three of them. He seemed graceful and refined, slightly like a scholar, but his eyes shone brightly as he spoke to the three of them. From today onwards, Zhou Feng will be the first senior brother. Chang Yang, you will be the second senior brother, while Bai Yu will be the little junior sister, Han Xian said firmly, leaving no room for discussion. How did I become the smallest? No. Master, this isn't fair. This doesn't make sense. I should be the second senior, so why did I end up as the smallest? Bai Yu refused to accept this. Sir, I have a two-colored soul core, while Junior Chang Yang has only condensed his one-colored soul core. I have no objections about Senior Shu Feng being the first senior, but why must Junior Chang Yang, who's weaker than me, have more seniority? That's clearly unfair. Han Xen looked at Bai Yu and said, Who told you seniority is determined by cultivation? Is that not it? Bai Yu pointed and said matter-of-factly. She felt wronged. Here, whoever makes it to the mountain top earlier will have greater seniority. Zhou Feng made it first, so he is the first senior. Chang Yang followed him, so Chang Yang is the second senior. You were last, so you're naturally the youngest in terms of seniority, Han Xian said firmly. Then he waved his hand. Enough. The matter has been settled, so don't talk about it anymore. Go find a place to set up a dwelling yourself as a place for cultivation. Come see me tomorrow morning. Remember, the dwelling must lie within my territory. With that, Han Xen directly left without even glancing at Bai Yu's sulking expression. Sir, how can you do this? It's unfair. Bai Yu sulked as Han Xen walked away. She was close to crying. Chapter 22:19 Laws of the Hallowed, No. Chang Yang, I want to change it back. I'm your senior sister. You're my little junior brother. Bai Yu turned towards Jian Chen. She glared at him and purposefully put up a stern demeanor like she was threatening him. Jian Chen could not help but smile. That's not something the two of us can decide. If junior sister is unwilling to accept it, junior can only go find teacher. With that, Jian Chen left and made his way off the mountain. Who's your little junior sister? Chang Yang, you're not allowed to call me that in the future, Bai Yu called out in annoyance. As if she had just suffered an injustice, she was unhappy. Afterwards, Jian Chen found a quiet area halfway up the mountain and carved out a cave, which would be his dwelling for cultivation in the future. The place he chose was inconspicuous. Not only was it in a remote region, but it was also among the bushes, so basically half of the entrance was obscured. It seemed extremely well hidden. As a dwelling, it naturally needed protective formations. However, it was inappropriate for Jian Chen to cast down overly powerful formations here, so he found some weaker formation discs and set them up at the entrance as protective formations. In just 6 hours, Jian Chen had completely set up his simple dwelling. Afterwards, he sat down in the center and began to think over his plans for the future. I can't stay in the Radiant Saint Hall for too long. The main reason why I've come here is for the cultivation method of hallowed Saint Masters. Once I get the cultivation method, I'll leave immediately. Jian Chen had begun to make up his mind secretly. As for the threat from the Azure Pring King, he had already thought of a plan. Since the Azure Pring King cannot set foot on the desolate plain, I have no need to worry about him at all here. If I leave the desolate plain in the future, I can go directly to the heavenly palace of Bishing on the Prosper Plain and return the Aneta Tower before asking the experts of the heavenly palace of Bishing to suppress the Azure Pring King. The only issue is the solitary sword ancestor. If he comes to the desolate plain, I can only attempt the path of swords, thought Jian Chen. Although he had already altered his appearance now, his disguise was basically useless before an expert like the solitary sword ancestor. The celestial sword saints set up the path of swords on the desolate plain, and it's rumored that reaching the end will give you the right to become the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple. I don't know what level of cultivation the Celestial Sword Saint has reached, but it's quite obvious from the rumors that he's an extremely terrifying existence on the desolate plain. He shouldn't be any weaker than the Solitary Sword Saint, so if push comes to shove, I'll go attempt it. However, attempting the Path of Swords also carries a tremendous amount of risk. I shouldn't attempt it unless I have no other choice because I don't have complete confidence that I can hide the sword spirits from an existence like the Solitary Sword Saint with my current level of cultivation. As he grew stronger, Jian Chen's ability to hide the sword spirits became better and better. After all, he was someone who had reached the major achievement of the chaotic body. Unless he encountered a peak expert who was far more powerful than him, it would be impossible for his greatest secrets to be discovered in a single glance. Before long, Jian Chen dismissed all of these thoughts. He spent the remaining time to consolidate his soul core that had just broken through. Cultivation was timeless, so he completely lost track of time. As a result, when Jian Chen roused from cultivation, it was already noon on the next day. The time that Han Xian told them to meet it had passed long ago. Looking at the sky, Jian Chen frowned. He left the cave and displayed the strength that belonged to a one-colored soul core radiant Saint Master and flew towards the top of the mountain. Very soon, Jian Chen reached the top of the mountain. He discovered that Zhuo Feng and Bai Yu were seated on the ground. They were surrounded by milky white radiant saint force, clearly already cultivating. Han Xian stood with his arms behind his back. He had his back towards the two of them as he blankly stared at the radiant saint hall that stood within the clouds. Eagerness filled the depths of his eyes. "Changyang, why are you late on the first day?" Han Xian asked with his back towards Jian Chen. He spoke very indifferently. "Sir, I only broke through to one-colored soul core yesterday, so when I was consolidating my cultivation in my dwelling, I forgot about time. I only roused just then." Jian Chen clasped his fist and said with composure. "All right," Han Xian replied gently. He did not look back at Jian Chen, nor did he continue to dwell on the matter. Instead, he said, "Do you know what Radiant Saint Force is?" Jian Chen was slightly surprised by this question. He thought that Han Xian was going to give him a full lecture on being late, but he had never thought it would end up like this. After a moment of thought, Jian Chen said, "Radiant Saint Force, from a simple sense, is an energy that only Radiant Saint Masters can see. This energy does not have outstanding offensive powers, but it has great healing powers. It can even revive people from the dead, making it extremely wondrous. From a more complicated aspect, Radiant Saint Force is one of the 3,000 ways that creates and supports the operation of this world." You are very correct. Radiant Saint Force is actually also one of the 3,000 laws. Do you know what the difference between Hallowed Saint Masters and Radiant Saint Master are? Han Xian continued to ask. This time, Jian Chen hesitated for a while before replying, "I don't know much about Hallowed Saint Masters, nor do I understand much about them. All I know is that Hallowed Saint Masters have grasped another law and are able to transform Radiant Saint Force, making it extremely powerful and offensive despite being rather below average originally. Its strength is no weaker than the laws known to possess the most offensive powers." Jian Chen had seldom come in contact with Hallowed Saint Master. There was only Xian Ming, so his knowledge about Hallowed Saint Master was naturally extremely limited. Han Xian finally returned to his senses. He looked at Jian Chen with shining eyes. "Changyang, everything else was correct. There's just one thing you got wrong. The law grasped by Hallowed Saint Masters is not equal to the laws known to possess the greatest offensive powers. It is even stronger. Do you know why?" Before Jian Chen could reply, Han Xian continued, "That's because the laws grasped by Hallowed Saint Masters is not just the power of laws, but the power of our spirits as well. This type of law is known as the laws of the hallowed by us." "The power of spirits," Jian Chen murmured. He found the term spirit both familiar and unfamiliar because it was the original form of the soul. Since many years ago, only souls existed in the world he interacted with. Very people still used the term spirit. "Tio, I think I explained this before." the soul/spirit kind of undergoes a metamorphosis after reaching sainthood, Saint Ruler in particular, and it basically becomes unbound from the soul, so even if the body is destroyed, the person is still alive as long as their souls are intact. In Chinese, they switch terms, so there's an individual term for soul before sainthood, and then an individual term for soul after sainthood. This frequently happens with many novels. However, the past translator never ended up planning for this, so I just used spirit/soul here to show the difference. Watch closely. This is the laws of the hallowed. Han Xen raised his hand slowly, and a blinding ball of white light gradually condensed in his hand. That was the laws of the hallowed. Jian Chen stared at the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand closely. The first time he had seen the laws of the hallowed was from Xian Ming, so this was the second time seeing it. However, he gained a completely different feeling from seeing the laws of the hallowed here compared to when he saw it from Xian Ming. This was because at that time, Xian Ming had used the laws of the hallowed to attack, completely displaying the swift and brutal aspect of the laws. It was extremely fast as well, so Jian Chen did not have much time to comprehend its secrets. Yet now, the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hands seemed much gentler to Jian Chen. Moreover, Han Xian condensed the laws at an extremely gradual rate, not only allowing Jian Chen to sense the mysteries in the laws with greater clarity, but also giving him ample time to closely comprehend it. Jian Chen could not help but close his eyes. At that moment, he felt like his soul had flown out and fused with the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand. Under this state, he could clearly sense all the mysteries of the laws of the hallowed, sensing all the changes that the laws went through in Han Xian's hands. At that moment, Jian Chen even felt like he had become the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand, where they were inseparable. Chapter 22:20 Emo Tianyun. Unknowingly, Jian Chen had already sat down. Milky white radiant saint force had enveloped him as well, gathering the radiant saint force from the surroundings unintentionally. As a result, he seemed exactly the same as Bai Yu and Zhuofeng right now, all of them being in a state of cultivation. However, unlike Bai Yu and Zhuofeng, Jian Chen's comprehension of the laws of the hallowed increased rapidly, while other two still struggled to grasp the secrets of the laws. As his comprehension constantly deepened, Jian Chen's knowledge and understanding of the laws of the hallowed became greater and greater. He had almost reached a rudimentary level with the laws. Time passed in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, it was already the evening of that day. Only when the sun set and dyed the sky red did they rouse. Sir, the laws of the hallowed are far too profound and mysterious. Even after a day of comprehending the laws of the hallowed you invoked, I still haven't made any progress, Bai Yu pouted and said in low spirits. Han Xen smiled. I never expected the three of you to grasp the laws of the hallowed immediately. Let alone you, but even 9-star geniuses won't be able to grasp the laws of the hallowed from a single glance at the same level of cultivation as you. My true intention was for you to witness the gateway to becoming a hallowed saint master so that I can pave a path for you beforehand. That way, it'll become slightly easier when you become a hallowed saint master in the future. Sir, is it very difficult to comprehend the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed saint master? Jian Chen asked. Han Xen nodded. It is quite difficult. For a radiant saint master to comprehend the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed saint master, it's no less difficult than a fighter going from the origin realm to godhood, or even more difficult. In our Radiant Saint Hall, basically all the Radiant Saint Masters with 3 colored soul cores spend a very long time before becoming a hallowed Saint Master. There are even other Radiant Saint Masters who only manage to truly comprehend the laws of the hallowed after condensing a 4-colored soul core. Of course, everything depends on personal talent. Some unprecedented prodigies can comprehend the laws of the hallowed before condensing a 3-colored soul core, but if your talent is far too lacking, even if you have a 7-colored soul core and become a radiant god king, you might not be fated to become a hallowed saint master. In the end, Han Xen looked at Zhuofeng and said, Zhuofeng, you're a 5-star genius, and you've already reached the 3-colored soul core. May I ask if you've benefited? Han Xen clearly held high hopes for Zhuofeng. Zhuofeng did not reply immediately. He thought about it for a while before replying, "Sir, I've managed to benefit slightly, but I still need some time before I truly comprehend the laws of the hallowed." Han Exen nodded in satisfaction. "I hope you can become a hallowed Saint Master while you have a three-colored soul core." "I will work hard and not disappoint you, sir," Zhuofeng said with great confidence. "These are my notes on comprehension that I've tidied through. Although it's not exactly precious, it'll bring some assistance to you. It also comes with a cultivation method that allows you to cultivate to the four-colored soul core. The three of you should take it and comprehend it. Of course, this cultivation method is rather standard. It's only suitable for Radiant Saint Masters who have not condensed a four-colored soul core, so it just happens to be enough for you." Han Xian then took out a few brand new books and passed it to Jianqin, Baiyu, and Zhuofeng. "Sir, may I ask how cultivation methods of higher grades can be obtained?" Jianqin asked. A cultivation method that could only reach the four-colored soul core was nowhere near enough for him. Better cultivation methods can only be obtained from the Tower of Radiance in the Sacred Hall. However, you still don't have the right to enter the Tower of Radiance right now. Enough, that will be all for today. You are dismissed. Han Exen waved his hand, turned around and left. "Junior brother, you sure are bold, late on the first day. Quick, tell senior sister how teacher punished you." As soon as Han Exen left, Baiyu looked at Jianqin with her large eyes and asked curiously, "What rudeness? I'm your second senior." "You're the little junior sister," Jianqin said in a joking yet displeased manner. "Your cultivation is weaker than mine, so of course you can only be my little junior brother. Unless your cultivation exceeds mine, it'll be impossible for me to accept you as my second senior," Baiyu snorted lightly and said in a purposefully arrogant manner. Zhuofeng could not help but frown when he saw Baiyu like that. He said, "Junior sister, senior has already gained some understanding of the laws of the hallowed. Come to the moon-viewing cliff at night. We can discuss our experiences with comprehending the laws of the hallowed." Baiyu completely understood. Zhuofeng wanted to pass on what he had comprehended to her, so her eyes immediately lit up. She agreed excitedly, "All right, sorry. I won't be leaving until you show up at the moon-viewing cliff tonight. Little junior brother, you have to come along and don't be late." Junior Changyang only has a one-colored soul core right now, so there's still some time before he comes in contact with the laws of the hallowed. He probably won't benefit if he comes, and it'll waste his time for cultivation instead. Junior Changyang, cultivate properly first. Once you condense a two-colored soul core, I'll pass on my experience to you, Zhuofeng said immediately. Clearly, he did not want Jianqin to come. "Thank you for your kind intentions, senior, but I just happen to desire to cultivate properly in a quiet environment. It would not be suitable for me to spend my time on other matters." Jianqin smiled indifferently and left. Before long, Jianqin returned to his extremely simple dwelling that had an entrance covered by bushes. He directly sat down and began to comprehend the laws of the hallowed again. For hours later, Jianqin's eyes snapped open. He raised his hands slowly, and immediately, a white power with a brutal presence condensed in his hand. Unsurprisingly, this power was the laws of the hallowed. Han Xian's conjuring of the laws of the hallowed was like a lighthouse in the dark to Jianqin. It pointed him in the direction that he could advance in, allowing him to gain a basic view of a rudimentary grasp over the laws of the hallowed. Now that he tried comprehending the laws again quietly, he basically grasped them completely before too long, becoming a hallowed Saint Master. Han Exen said that most Radiant Saint Masters only become hallowed Saint Master when they have three-colored or four-colored soul cores, yet I've become one with just a one-colored soul core, Jianqin murmured as he looked at the laws of the hallowed that had gathered in his hand. It has been over 1,000,000 years since someone has become a hallowed Saint Master with a one-colored soul core. Impressive. Impressive, Jianqin. Your talent is indeed extremely outstanding. It fills me with amazement. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind Jianqin. The sudden voice immediately caused Jianqin's face to change dramatically. He shot up from the group instinctively and turned around, looking behind him in shock. Even though he was cultivating, he still remained somewhat vigilant of the world around him, Yet he failed to sense that someone had appeared in his dwelling silently while he was cultivating. A white-robed middle-aged man with a resolute face stood behind Jianchen silently. He was like air, possessing no presence, and Jianchen's soul and senses could not detect him. He could only see him with his eyes. However, when he saw the middle-aged man clearly, Jianchen became completely stunned. Disbelief filled his face. "Who are you?" Jianchen asked in surprise as he was in emotional turmoil. The middle-aged man smiled. "I think you already know who I am." "Senior Emotinyan, is it really you?" Jianchen called out. He felt rather dazed and felt like he was dreaming because the middle-aged man was the same person who had left behind a great legend that lasted 1,000,000 years on the Tianyuan continent, Emo Tianyun. Whether it was Shui Yunlan or Shaoling, they all wanted to find Emo Tianyun as soon as possible. However, the saint's world was so vast, so finding a single person was anything but easy. It was even more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack. However, he had never thought that Emo Tianyun would appear here, strangely enough, much less in his dwelling. How did Emo Tianyun find him? Moreover, Jianchen did not use his original appearance. He currently had a completely different face. How did Emo Tianyun manage to recognize him with a single glance? Furthermore, this place was within the Radiant Saint Hall's territory. Was Emo Tianyun a part of the Radiant Saint Hall since he suddenly appeared here? At that moment, besides surprise and joy, Jianchen was filled with queries now that he had suddenly found the greatest human expert of the past, Emo Tianyun. Chapter 22-21. Suspicions about identity. Emo Tianyun looked at Jianchen in admiration and sighed emotionally. "When my clones saw you near the Yinyang Saint Rock, you were nowhere close to godhood. I never thought that in just a few short centuries, you would become someone renowned in the saints' world. Apart from those hermits who always remain in seclusion, there's basically no one who doesn't know your name in the saints' world now." Emo Tianyun smiled mysteriously towards the end. Jianchen smiled awkwardly. Naturally, he knew that Emo Tianyun was referring to the bounties from the Azure Peng King and the Solitary Sword Ancestor. Indeed, a mere God King wanted by two peak experts of the saints' world, the Azure Peng King and the Solitary Sword Ancestor, would lead to quite the disturbance. It would even raise the close attention of many large organizations. "Senior Emo Tianyun, how did you find me? Are you a part of the Radiant Saint Hall?" Jianchen stated his suspicions. "I'm not a part of the Radiant Saint Hall, but finding you is nothing difficult." Emo Tianyun smiled mysteriously. He looked at Jianchen amiably and said, "Do you still remember that tower-shaped saint artifact you got from the Radiant Saint Union on the Tianyuan continent?" "Of course I do," said Jianchen. The Radiant Saint artifact had been of great use to him back in the lower world. It was also the reason why he could become a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master. However, the quality of the Radiant Saint Tower was limited. As his strength increased, the Radiant Saint artifact gradually became useless, so he never really used it after coming to the Saints' world. The reason why I can find you in the vast Saints' world is because of that Radiant Saint artifact. In the past, a clone of mine entered the Radiant Saint artifact in the lower world and destroyed the seal within the Radiant Saint artifact while I was there, freeing up the Radiant Saint Force Origin energy trap there. When I destroyed the seal, I also left behind an extremely obscure imprint, so I could find you in the Saints' world as long as you still possessed the Radiant Saint artifact," said Emo Tianyun. "Then, in other words, Senior already knew as soon as I came to the Saints' world?" Jianchen said. At the same time, he finally understood that the seal within the Radiant Saint artifact that even the artifact spirit could do nothing about was destroyed by Emo Tianyun. This made him feel some gratitude towards Emo Tianyun. After all, if it were not for the destruction of the seal, he would have never been able to become a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master. Emo Tianyun shook his head. "I don't know exactly when you came to the Saints' world because the imprint I left in the Radiant Saint artifact can only be sensed through a corresponding secret technique." Jianchen felt extremely elated when the past greatest human expert of the Tianyuan continent had suddenly appeared. Afterwards, Jianchen placed down a stone table outside the dwelling and sat there with Mo Tianyun. Under the dark, starry skies, they began a long conversation. Senior Mo Tianyun, I have something I'd like to inquire about. The winged tiger god that appeared on the Tianyuan continent during the ancient times should be the same person as Senior Mo Tianyun, right? Or maybe he's a clone of Senior Mo Tianyun? Jianchen asked. Jianchen had gradually come up with this suspicion through his understanding of the past matters back on the Tianyuan continent. However, he was just not certain. How did you reach that conclusion? Mo Tianyun asked calmly. Jianchen focused his mind and tidied through his thoughts before saying slowly, first, of the 4 champions in the past, there have been records of growth for the war god Ergens of the 100 races and the sea goddess of the sea race. Only you and the winged tiger god basically appeared out of nowhere, and you were already far more powerful than Saint Emperors. There weren't any records of your growth in the ancient records at all. Secondly, the world where the Tianyuan continent resides in had actually been sealed up over 3 million years ago, preventing anyone from reaching the origin realm. The reason why the war god could reach the origin realm was because of his powerful bloodline, while the sea goddess could reach the origin realm because she's the same as Shaoling, a natural spirit. And natural spirits are all at the origin realm as soon as they come into existence, unbound by the world. So whether it's Ergens or the sea goddess, there are all reasons why they can reach the origin realm. Only Senior Mo Tianyun and the winged tiger god had no reason at all. This makes the two of you extremely similar. Thirdly, when I looked through the records, I discovered that after the winged tiger god had vanished from the Tianyuan continent with the dragon and phoenix clans, Senior Mo Tianyun vanished as well. Mo Tianyun smiled mysteriously. You determined that I was the winged tiger god just from that? Have you ever considered that once the winged tiger god left with the dragon and phoenix clans, I went to where the Inyang Saint Rock was and watched over it? But you only sent a clone to watch over the rock, and the clone could have been the winged tiger god as well. Jianchen stared at Mo Tianyun with brimming interest and continued, of course, this isn't enough to explain that Senior is the same person as the winged tiger god. The real reason why I was able to reach this conclusion was because of Shaoling. Shaoling. Mo Tianyun's eyes narrowed when he heard Shaoling's name, and a sliver of undetectable killing intent flickered through his eyes. Naturally, the killing intent was not directed towards Shaoling, but the heavenless demon Exalt. In the past when I was in Mercenary City, Shaoling had once sensed Senior's presence from me, but Senior had already vanished from the Tianyuan continent for 1,000,000 years. How would it have been possible for me to come in contact with Senior? At that time, even I did not know why Shaoling sensed Senior's presence from me. But afterwards, as I grew stronger and understood more and more things, I finally realized that the presence Shaoling sensed from me was the presence from the young winged tiger god. At that time, the white tiger had only been born recently, so it was naturally unable to conceal its presence. I had spent so much time with the winged tiger god as well, so I naturally carried its presence. When Shaoling said she sensed her master's presence back then, it was more like sensing the presence of the winged tiger god. This presence belonged to winged tiger gods, but to different people at the same time, which was why Shaoling said the presence was extremely faint. Afterwards, as the white tiger grew up, he learnt to conceal his presence, and his presence changed slightly, which was why Shaoling failed to sense anything from the white tiger anymore. And there's one more point. The 18 pieces of beast fur that have been spread across the world should have come from the winged tiger god. Yet when they were united, Senior's legacy appeared, the way of slaughter. Senior comprehended the way of slaughter while the legacy that the white tiger received in the beast god hall was also the way of slaughter. Jianchen did not continue. Instead, he looked at Mo Tianyun quietly. Chapter 22-22 Origins of the Tower of Radiance. Mo Tianyun was in no hurry to speak after listening to Jianchen's analysis. His expression did not change either. He continued to look at Jianchen leisurely, but the admiration in his eyes became heavier. You're right. The winged tiger god from the ancient times was indeed me, Mo Tianyun said steadily. He did not try to hide this. Senior, just who are you? Jianchen looked at Mo Tianyun deeply. Mo Tianyun smiled. It doesn't matter who you think I am. What's important is that you understand I have no ill intentions towards you. Of course, if you want to know about my origins, you are welcome to ask the sword spirits. They've probably guessed it already. Mo Tianyun, do you really come from the immortals' world? At this moment, the sword spirits appeared. A wisp of mist gradually condensed into two figures. They did not give off any presence or even sword chi. Clearly, the sword spirits knew that they were in the boundary of the Radiant Saint Hall, so they hid to their greatest ability. Mo Tianyun stared at the sword spirits and nodded. He did not talk. Mo Tianyun, why are you in the saint's world if you're from the immortals' world? And what's the situation with the immortals' world? Is the sword sect of violent heavens well? The sword spirits asked. They became nervous when the sword sect of violet heavens was mentioned. Mo Tianyun seemed to think back to the past from that, and a sliver of gloominess flashed through his eyes, along with deep hatred. In the end, Mo Tianyun sighed gently. He answered selectively, I've already left the immortals' world over 1,000,000 years ago. I only know that the sword sect of violet heavens suffered heavy losses from that battle over 3,000,000 years ago and was gradually declining. I do not know about its current situation. Has the sword sect of violent heavens declined? Ziying asked in low spirits. The sword sect of violet heavens lost far too many experts during that battle, so declining is expected. As long as the traditions and legacies of our sect remain, there will be a day where we become powerful once more, said Qing Sua. At this moment, she could not help but think about the warning from the samsaric immortal Exalt, where he said Jianchen should not return to the immortals' world until he was powerful enough. For some reason, Qing Sua had suddenly felt an ill foreboding when she heard the samsaric immortal Exalt's words. Mo Tianyun looked at Jianchen and said, Jianchen, since you're both a fighter and a hallowed saint master, you must be a wielder of martial soul force. However, you must bear in mind that while being in the saint's world, you need to hide the existence of the sword spirits, but in the Radiant Saint Hall, you need to hide your identity as a wielder of martial soul force. You can't expose the fact that you can use martial soul force to the Radiant Saint Hall. Thank you for your concern, Senior. I already knew that the martial soul lineage has grievances with the Radiant Saint Hall. I definitely won't expose my martial soul force in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jianchen said before pausing. Then he looked at Mo Tianyun eagerly and asked, Senior Mo Yun, do you know anything about martial soul force? There are just far too few members of the martial soul lineage in the saint's world, so there aren't a lot of rumors regarding martial soul force. I haven't come in contact with any people from the martial soul lineage either, so I don't understand this power very well, replied Mo Tianyun. Then he looked at the Radiant Saint Hall that stood among the clouds with all of its holiness and said, The Tower of Radiance within the Radiant Saint Hall has records of all cultivation methods and various battle skills for Radiant Saint Masters. It's an extremely rich collection, far more than what the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall knows. As a matter of fact, even the cultivation methods of the leader and vice leaders come from the Tower of Radiance. As a result, if you want to learn about martial soul force, you can only go to the Tower of Radiance. Are there really that many records in the Tower of Radiance? Jianchen asked in surprise. Mo Tianyun did not answer his question. Instead, he looked at Ziying and Qing Sua. The Tower of Radiance is not simple. You two sword spirits should have heard about its origins to some degree. We do know a little. Ziying nodded. It said that the Tower of Radiance, us twin swords, and the Anata Grand Prime's Anata Tower are god artifacts of the same level. The Tower of Radiance has existed for an extremely long period of time. What? The Tower of Radiance is actually so powerful? Jianchen's heart shuddered when he heard that. He asked, since the Tower of Radiance is such a powerful god artifact, wouldn't there be no organizations that would be bold enough to offend the Radiant Saint Hall on the desolate plain? That's correct. There is basically no one who is willing to provoke an organization with a god artifact like that across the entire Saint's world, let alone on a single plane. However, the Tower of Radiance has lost its artifact spirit, unfortunately, Mo Tianyun explained to Jianchen. He had been in the Saint's world for so long, so his understanding of the Tower of Radiance was obviously greater than the sword spirit's. Speaking of which, the Radiant Saint Hall is actually one of the lengthiest lineages in the Saints' world's history. It has existed through 2 eons at the very least, and the Tower of Radiance was forged by a supreme expert who had reached a level akin to Grand Exalt's 2 eons ago. But throughout the glorious history of the Radiant Saint Hall, the Tower of Radiance has experienced several great battles. In the last battle, the Tower of Radiance was finally heavily damaged, and the artifact spirit died during that battle. As a result, the Tower of Radiance has only become a safe place to store records now. It has no other use. Mo Tianyun's explanation allowed Jianchen to gain a brand new understanding of the Radiant Saint Hall. However, he also experienced doubts at the same time. He asked out of confusion, hasn't anyone refined the Tower of Radiance after that? And why has the Tower of Radiance only become a place to store records? Can't people hide in it when they encounter powerful enemies? The Tower of Radiance seems to be rather special. According to my understanding, probably only the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall who can directly come in contact with the secrets of the Tower of Radiance knows why no one has been able to refine the Tower of Radiance, said Mo Tianyun. Moreover, the Tower of Radiance isn't as simple as you think it is. When the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance passed away, its residual regrets filled every inch of the Tower of Radiance. All the hallowed Saint Masters that enter the Tower of Radiance have to endure the pressure from this regret at all times. Without enough strength, it's impossible to remain in there for long. Even Radiant God Kings will struggle to stay in there for a year. Chapter 22-23. A deal. Senior Emonian, you seem to understand the Radiant Saint Hall a lot. Emonian smiled mysteriously again. I've come to the Radiant Saint Hall quite a few times. I've also entered their sacred hall, so I do know quite a lot about it. It looks like Senior Mo Tianyun has close ties with the high-ranking members of the Radiant Saint Hall, thought Jianchen. Then he thought of something and asked, Senior Mo Tianyun, do you know how to enter the Tower of Radiance? Since Mo Tianyun knew the important figures of the Radiant Saint Hall, his knowledge was naturally greater than his teacher Han Exin. If Mo Tianyun knew the most direct way to enter the Tower of Radiance, it would be good news to Jianchen. Mo Tianyun said in thought, 2 vice leaders need to take part personally whenever the Tower of Radiance is opened, so you can't just go in when you want to. The easiest way is to become the disciple of a vice leader and get them to open the Tower of Radiance for you. Once people learn about your talent, there'll be many vice leaders who would want to take you in as a disciple. After all, there has only been one other person who became a hallowed Saint Master with a one-colored soul core in the past 1,000,000 years. Moreover, the Radiant Saint Hall is about to decide a chosen saint. Once they have a chosen saint, the Tower of Radiance will be opened once again, and every single chosen saint can choose 9 retainers to enter the Tower of Radiance with them. Mo Tianyun paused. He seemed to look at Jianchen with a smile. You can choose to become one of the 9 and follow the chosen saint into the Tower of Radiance. That's a second way in. Otherwise, there's only one last method. The Tower of Radiance opens once every 500 years, and all the Radiant Saint Masters can use their merit to exchange for time in the Tower of Radiance. However, I wouldn't recommend the last method. That's because only around 200 or 300 years have passed since the last opening, so you'll need to wait another 200 years at the very least. Jianchen frowned when he heard that. He murmured, 200 years are indeed a little too long, but the first method will increase the risk of me exposing my martial soul force. It looks like I can only become a retainer of a chosen saint then. Being selected as a retainer is not easy. In the history of the Radiant Saint Hall, every single retainer has been a peak God King. Although peak God King Radiant Saint Masters have ceased to exist in the Radiant Saint Hall in the recent years, the chosen saints have never had retainers who were weaker than early God King. But right now, your level as a Radiant Saint Master is only equivalent to receival, said Mo Tianyun. It was very obvious what he was trying to say. With Jianchen's current strength, he had no right to become a retainer of a chosen saint. It looks like becoming a retainer is almost impossible for me right now. Jianchen smiled bitterly. At this moment he really had no idea what to do. Did he really have to wait for 2 centuries? This was because the Tower of Radiance truly possessed something he needed. He might even be able to find everything the leader of the Radiant St. Hall knew and many powerful cultivation methods and battle skills in there. This was because Mo Tianyun had already disclosed the fact that whether it was the leader or the vice leaders, all they knew came from the Tower of Radiance. As a result, Jian Chen had to enter the Tower of Radiance. However, out of all the choices presented before him right now, only the third one would work. He had never even considered taking a vice leader as a master, as it would definitely increase his chances of being exposed. He could hide the existence of the sword spirits, but he did not have complete confidence in hiding his martial soul force. As a vice leader of the Radiant St. Hall, their cultivation would definitely be far greater than his. Their knowledge, understanding, and the comprehension of the laws of the hallowed would be at a level that Jianchen could only look up to. As long as he exposed a single hole in his story, he might end up being exposed. However, becoming a retainer of a chosen saint required the cultivation of a 7-colored soul core at the very least. He had just condensed a 1-colored soul core, so he was nowhere near that level. Xianming's father was one of the 8 vice leaders. Currently, Xuangming was hiding in the Enna Tower. Jianchen did consider using his connection to Xianming, but he also ended up dismissing the idea. Xianming already knew his identity as a fighter. If he asked Xianming for help, it would be no different than actively exposing his martial soul force. Seeing Jianchen's frown, Mo Tianyun smiled. If you're willing to become the retainer of a chosen saint, I do have quite a good idea. What idea? Jianchen immediately asked. Even if he had to become the retainer of a chosen saint temporarily, he would be extremely willing as long as he could enter the Tower of Radiance. Mo Tianyun waved his hand, and a fist-sized ball of light immediately appeared. Jianchen immediately felt an uncontrollable desire rise up from the depths of his soul when he saw the ball of light. He was tempted to devour the ball of light directly. The ball of light gave off a feeling that brought great comfort to Jianchen's soul. Just a few glances at it gave him the impression that the power of his soul had increased drastically. This is a pure soul, the purest power of an expert's soul after it has been refined countless times and purged of all impurities, Jianchen called out. He just happened to have read about pure souls from a space ring he had obtained, so he recognized it with a single glance. This pure soul actually gives me almost irresistible urges. It looks like this pure soul has been refined from a primordial realm expert's soul at the very least, Jianchen said sternly as his emotions became extremely mixed. A primordial realm expert could be considered as someone who had made it to the apex of the saint's world. These figures were once supreme existences in his eyes, yet now he was actually looking at a pure soul refined from a primordial realm expert's soul. The owner of this pure soul was an infinite prime, so the density of the power within it is enough to interest any god king. This should be enough to tempt those 9-star geniuses who are about to take part in the competition to become the chosen saint, said Mo Tianyun. The light in Jianchen's eyes flickered as he hesitated. In the end, he shook his head. Senior, this is just too precious. I can't accept it. Mo Tianyun smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'm not giving you this pure soul for nothing. I'll use this and some other treasures to strike a deal with you. May I ask what item on me has caught Senior's eyes? Jianchen's heart tightened as he suddenly thought of the Anata Tower on him. Chapter 22-24. The fusion of the twin swords. It had already been some time since he left planet Tianming. The news that the Anata Tower was on him had probably been leaked by now. As a peak god artifact, the Anata Tower's value was enough to drive countless peak experts mad even if it was still damaged. What happened on planet Tianming was the best example. As a result, when Jianchen heard that Mo Tianyun wanted to strike a deal with him, he subconsciously thought of the Anata Tower. Apart from the Anata Tower, he could not think of anything else he possessed that could catch Mo Tianyun's attention. Senior, has the Anata Tower caught your eye? Jianchen asked. The value of the Eneta Tower was far greater than a single pure soul. If Emo Tianyun really did want the Eneta Tower, what was he supposed to do? Seeing how stern Jianchen had become, Emo Tianyun could not help but smile bitterly. The Eneta Tower is an object of desire. It's not something that anyone can try to possess. If Exion of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing decides to look into this matter, there's basically no one who can maintain possession over it. What I want is for you to take action once. You want me to take action? Jianchen was surprised by that. His expression became strange, and he said, Senior Emoun, I might not be able to provide you with any assistance at all with my current strength. Emoun shook his head gently. Never underestimate yourself. You have the sword spirits. Even if your current strength is very weak, even if the sword spirits have not recovered to their peak condition, fusing the two swords can still unleash startling power. Emo Tianyun stared at Jianchen sternly, and I happen to need you to use the two swords once. No. Master, don't agree to it. Master, you must not. The backlash from fusing the two swords is so powerful that you should never do it unless you've run out of choices. Before Jianchen could say anything, Ziying and Qing Suo objected. To the two sword spirits, the fusion of the twin swords had long since become a forbidden technique that they should never touch unless they were completely out of options. This was because even their master, who was a grand exalt, died to the fusion of the twin swords in the end, so it was even more impossible for Jianchen to survive. Jianchen remained calm. He looked at Emo Tianyun and said, Senior Emoun, can you tell me the reason? Why do you need me to fuse the two swords? Emo Tianyun sighed gently. He stood up from his seat and stood in the overgrown grass around the cliff. He stared at the shining moon in the sky and said, It's fine if I tell you. What you are seeing right now is actually one of my 9 major clones. My original body has been trapped in a powerful formation by an enemy. The formation is tough, but it can't keep me trapped forever. In just several tens of thousand years, I'll be able to break free with my strength alone. But recently, something happened on the cloud plane. Xiaoling was taken away by the heavenless demon Exalt of the Tian Empire. The heavenless demon Exalt is a demonic cultivator, so Xiaoling is in constant danger. As a result, my original body has to break free immediately. What? Xiaoling has been captured? Jianchen's face changed drastically. Suddenly, he stood up, and his gaze became extremely sharp. Killing intent rose up in his heart. He treated Xiaoling as his own younger sister. He would never allow anything to happen to her. Senior Emo Tianyun, what cultivation does this heavenless demon Exalt possess? Jianchen asked gruffly with an ugly expression. He has just become a 4th heavenly layer Grand Prime. He's not much weaker compared to the Azure Pring King who has been hunting you, said Emo Tianyun. Jianchen's heart sank when he learnt of the heavenless demon Exalt's strength. He felt powerless. A 4th heavenly layer Grand Prime was an insurmountable existence in his eyes. You don't need to worry. As long as my original body breaks free, the heavenless demon Exalt is no issue, said Emo Tianyun. He spoke indifferently, like he did not take the heavenless demon Exalt seriously at all. If that's the case, let's go right now. I'll fuse the twin swords and assist you in destroying the seal, Jianchen said without any hesitation. He was panic-stricken, extremely worried about Xiaoling's safety. Master, the fusion is far too dangerous. Master, you can't act recklessly. The sword spirits continually tried to persuade Jianchen. In their eyes, Jianchen had no need to fuse the twin swords at all over this. The price was just not worth it. Ziying, Qing Suo, you don't have to say anything more. As long as I can save Xiaoling, I don't mind no matter how great the price is, Jianchen said firmly. You don't need to worry too much. The fusion of the twin swords isn't necessarily a bad thing to Jianchen. Jianchen cultivates the chaotic body, but according to my knowledge of chaotic force, even if he reaches the peak of great perfection, it still will not be the real deal. That power that split the heavens from the earth that appears when the swords fuse is true chaotic force. The previous master of the twin swords died during the fusion because he never cultivated the chaotic body. He was unable to endure the impact of the chaotic force, but Jianchen is completely different. If he fuses the twin swords, he can sense what true chaotic force is like, Mo Tianyun said to the sword spirits. The sword spirits immediately fell silent after that. They knew Mo Tianyun was right. Then Mo Tianyun looked at Jian Chen and said, I need to properly prepare before destroying the seal. There are some secrets that only the two of us know, and it should remain like that. Wait for me. I'll come back for you in 3 days. Jian Chen nodded. Naturally, he understood what Mo Tianyun was referring to. It was the problem of their identity. Once their identity of being from the immortals' world was exposed, they would no longer be able to remain in the saints' world. Afterwards, Mo Tianyun left. He left just like how he had come, silently and without leaving a single trace. Jian Chen was in no mood to cultivate anymore. Xiao Ling had been captured, ending up in the hands of a demonic cultivator. No one knew how she was right now. Jian Chen became unsettled and unable to sit still, worrying for Xiao Ling very much. What is Ming Dong doing? Hasn't he left for the cloud plane long ago? How did Xiao Ling end up being captured? Jian Chen grumbled inside. At that moment, he even considered handing the Aneta Tower to the heavenly palace of Bixing immediately so that he could ask the First Majesty to assist him. However, after thinking it over several times, he found that Mo Tianyun would be slightly more reliable. After all, Mo Tianyun was the same as him. He was someone who truly cared for Xiao Ling. In the following 3 days, Jian Chen truly understood how days could feel like years. During those 3 days, he was in no mood to cultivate at all. Whenever he saw Han Exin in the morning every day, he seemed like he was absent-minded the entire time. Chapter 22-25. The Cosmic Formation of the Fire-Purifying Lotus. Little junior brother, what is wrong with you recently? Why are you always frowning? If there's anything bothering you, you can tell me, your senior. I might be able to help you, Baiyu whispered in Jian Chen's ear. There was a refreshing fragrance on her body. Her voice was filled with concern. Even Han Exin managed to tell that someone was off with Jian Chen. He asked a few simple questions and did not probe into the matter anymore. Zhuo Feng remained as cold as before, paying no attention to Jian Chen. Finally, the 3 days passed. On that day, Jian Chen purposefully asked for a day off and did not go to the mountaintop. He stood outside his dwelling, waiting for Mo Tianyun's arrival quietly. Junior, so your dwelling is here. I finally found you. Look at you. Of all the places you could choose for a dwelling, you chose such a remote place, making me spend so much time to find you. And why is it so messy here? There are weeds and bushes everywhere. How can a place like this be a dwelling? At this moment, Baiyu flew over from afar slowly whilst being enveloped by radiant saint force. Little junior sister, why have you come? Jian Chen frowned as he looked at Baiyu who stood before him. Baiyu wrinkled her nose in displeasure. She snorted, What little junior sister? You should be saying senior sister. I've said it in the past. Before your strength has surpassed mine, you're not allowed to call me your little junior sister. Baiyu made her way around Jian Chen and stared at him with her large, bright eyes. She said, Little junior brother, you have been abnormal in the past few days, and you didn't even go to teacher's class. I worry for you, so I specially came to see you. Thank you for your concern, junior sister, but I'm fine. I plan on entering seclusion, so please return, said Jian Chen before turning around and entering his dwelling. He activated the protective formation and locked Baiyu outside. He constantly worried about Xiao Ling, so he was in no mood to talk to Baiyu. Baiyu stood outside the dwelling and looked at the entrance that had been enveloped by formations. She pouted with much displeasure as she grumbled quietly, So much for my kind intentions. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have come to see you. Once Baiyu left, Mo Tianyun appeared silently where she was before. With a flash, he passed through Jian Chen's low-level formations and entered the dwelling. Senior Mo Tianyun, can we set off now? Jian Chen immediately gathered his focus when he saw Mo Tianyun. The more time we waste, the more danger Xiao Ling will be in. Let's not tarry and set off right now, said Mo Tianyun. He grabbed Jian Chen's shoulder with one hand while a simple talisman appeared in the other. After activating the talisman, an energy for teleportation immediately surged out and wrapped around them, causing them to vanish. When Jianchen reappeared, he had arrived in a large expanse of outer space. He knew he had left the desolate plain now, but he had no idea just how far away he was. Is Senior Mo Tianyun's original body trapped here? Jianchen thought. The light in his eyes flickered as he studied every inch of the space there, but he failed to find anything in the end. At this moment, the space near them suddenly distorted, and a huge spatial crack suddenly ripped open. Under Jianchen's watch, a meteor actually flew out. Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed when he saw the meteor because an old man with a sword on his back sat on it. Even though the old man seemed simple, giving off no presence, Jianchen felt him radiate with a great sense of threat. Unsurprisingly, this person was the solitary sword ancestor. However, Jianchen had only heard of the solitary sword ancestor before. He had never seen him, so he failed to recognize him. Do the three successors satisfy you? Emotanyan looked at the solitary sword ancestor seated on the meteor and asked calmly. The solitary sword ancestor's face was bright as he was in high spirits. He was clearly extremely happy. He said in delight, "I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied, all right. I'm completely satisfied. I owe you a huge favor for this. You'll be able to return this favor very soon." Mo Tianyun smiled indifferently. Afterwards, he formed a seal with a hand and struck it towards the space before him. Immediately, the calm space began to distort heavily, forming a spatial gate that was several hundred meters across. "Let's go in," Mo Tianyun called to the solitary sword ancestors before striding in with Jianchen. There was a region of complete void on the other side of the spatial gate. There were no stars and no light. There was only darkness that stretched as far as the eyes could see. The solitary sword ancestor got off his meteor and crossed the distance with a single step. He studied the surroundings and said, "I never would have thought that such a tough miniature world would be hidden here. If I didn't look carefully, I really would have struggled to discover its existence." The solitary sword ancestor looked at Emotanyan and said, "Is this where your original body is trapped?" Mo Tianyun nodded. He pointed ahead and said, "You must have sensed the invisible wall up ahead. The invisible wall has formed a tough obstacle that keeps my original body trapped. I only need you to destroy the wall." Jianchen also looked in front, but he failed to discover anything. Even when he used the senses of his soul, he still found nothing. "It looks like this invisible wall can't be discovered without a certain level of strength," thought Jianchen. "This invisible wall is as tough as a medium-quality god artifact. With the strength of your original body, getting through this invisible wall is nothing difficult. Why do you need my help?" The solitary sword ancestor studied the invisible wall for a while before asking out of doubt. "It's not as simple as you think it is. Do it." Mo Tianyun backed up with Jianchen, pulling very far away from the solitary sword ancestor. The solitary sword ancestor nodded slowly. In the next moment, an extremely powerful sword intent flooded out from his body. The simple sword on his back shone with dazzling light, illuminating the surroundings and purging the darkness like the sun. The solitary sword ancestor wielded the sword and directly stabbed out. The stab was like a streak of light, seemingly skewering the entire region of space. It struck the invisible wall up ahead with terrifying force. That's the power of the major achievement of Sword Sage. "Pay close attention," Mo Tianyun said to Jianchen softly as he looked at the solitary sword ancestor. "An expert who has reached the major achievement of Sword Sage?" Jianchen was extremely shocked when he heard that. He stared at the old man before him and asked, "Senior Mo, who is he?" "He's the solitary sword ancestor who has been searching for you, but he won't be causing any problems for you in the future," Mo Tianyun said easily. At this moment, there was a deafening boom, and with that, scorching flames leaked out, dyeing the entire region of darkness red. The invisible wall shattered from the solitary sword ancestor's attack, but behind the invisible wall, there were flames that burned for all of eternity. They seemed to be able to burn space itself, radiating with terrifying heat. The solitary sword ancestor's face changed when he saw the flames. Immediately, he became much sterner than he had ever been and growled, "This is the Flame Reverend's cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. Have you been trapped by the Flame Reverend Grand Prime's cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus?" "That's right. I've been trapped here for tens of thousands of years now, but the person maintaining the formation isn't the Flame Reverend," said Mo Tianyun. The solitary sword ancestor was stern. He stared deeply at the dazzling, raging fire and said sternly, "If it really was the Flame Reverend, you would not have been able to last until now. However, the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus is not something I can destroy." "Just leave what is next to us," said Mo Tianyun before making a gesture to invite the solitary sword ancestor to leave. The solitary sword ancestor knew that Mo Tianyun did not want him to see what happened next, so he did not hesitate either. He nodded and glanced at Jianchen deeply before leaving. Chapter 22-26, True Chaotic Force, 1. As soon as Jianchen heard the mention of the Flame Reverend Grand Prime, his attention was raised. He was not unfamiliar with the name of the Flame Reverend Grand Prime. He was a vicious person who dared to move against Grand Exalt in order to become a Grand Exalt. Previously, in the lower world, Jianchen once saw a projection that he suspected to be the Enata Grand Prime on the 9th floor of the Enata Tower. At the same time, he learnt from her that after the Enata Grand Prime had been heavily injured by the greatest expert of the Immortals world, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, she tried to return and was ambushed by the Flame Reverend Grand Prime and her disciple, Taji. At that time, the Flame Reverend Grand Prime wanted to take the Enata Grand Prime's comprehension of the laws of fire while she was heavily injured, but in the end, the Flame Reverend underestimated the Enata Grand Prime. He still was not her opponent even when she was heavily injured. In the end, the Enata Grand Prime's disciple, Taji, was personally killed by the Enata Grand Prime, and even the Flame Reverend lost his body to the Enata Grand Prime, fleeing with just his soul. Even now, Jianchen was not certain whether the projection he saw on the 9th floor of the Enata Tower within the heavenly palace of Bishing actually came from the Enata Grand Prime, or it was just an act from the artifact spirit. However, there was one thing he was certain about. The Flame Reverend Grand Prime working with Taji to ambush the Enata Grand Prime did take place. Otherwise, as Taji's disciple, Su Ran would not have been drawn into the entire matter and be hunted down for millions of years by the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Senior Emotonyun, is this Flame Reverend very powerful? Where even the solitary sword ancestor fears him so much? Jianchen asked about the Flame Reverend Grand Prime. Mo Tianyun nodded. The Flame Reverend is indeed very powerful. He's one of the handful peak experts of the Saints' world, only a step away from reaching Grand Exalt. However, the Flame Reverend is quite a madman. It's rumored that in order to overcome the final step for his laws of fire, he actually moved against the Enata Grand Prime recklessly. The Enata Grand Prime's strength ranks within the top 3 of the 7 Grand Exalts of the Saints' world. As such, let alone the fact that the Flame Reverend still hadn't taken the final step, even if he did and became a Grand Exalt himself, he still would not have been able to steal the Enata Grand Prime's comprehension. After failing to lay his hands on the Enata Grand Prime, the Flame Reverend Grand Prime then extended his hands towards the Ice Goddess, hoping to find what he needed to take the final step from the Ice Goddess. Jianchen's heart immediately sank from that. He said sternly, "Looks like the person behind Nenpanin is the Flame Reverend Grand Prime." Mo Tianyun looked at Jianchen deeply and said, "I know you have a sister from the Tianyuan continent called Changyang Mingyue. If you're able to reach out to her somehow, tell her that exact same thing, just in case she's ignorant about the enemy and returns to the Ice Goddess Hall recklessly, right into the enemy's trap before she is powerful enough. Perhaps you can get your sister to go to the heavenly palace of Bishing." In the past, the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing hunted down the Flame Reverend Grand Prime across the entire world and shook up the entire Saints' world. Only when the Flame Reverend Grand Prime hid well, and the First Majesty was no longer able to find his traces, did the hunt come to an end. Jianchen nodded as his heart became rather heavy. He secretly worried for Fairy Hao Yu, who he had separated with several years ago. As for his sister going to find the First Majesty, he knew that such a matter was impossible because he had heard from Shui Yunlan that his sister had once come into conflict with the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. If the First Majesty learnt about his sister's current state, it would have been fortunate enough if she did not take advantage of the situation, so providing assistance was even more impossible. Let's do it. I can't find another suitable person for destroying this formation aside from you because there are some secrets that other people cannot learn about. As he said that, Mo Tianyun took out a hand-sized formation disc. The formation disc was bronze in color, and it was covered with countless profound inscription. Every single line of inscription hid the truths of the world, so it seemed like laws intermingling with one another. I'll cast down this peak-level formation in the surroundings to prevent any presence from leaking out when you fuse the twin swords, just in case some expert of the Saints' world senses it. With a wave of his hand, Mo Tianyun had already cast the formation discs into space and enveloped the surroundings with a huge formation. He was extremely cautious. Jian Chen approached the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus silently, and the sword spirits also appeared above Jian Chen's head at that moment. "Master, have you really made your decision?" The sword spirits asked to confirm one more time. Currently, their illusionary faces were filled with seriousness. They had recovered quite a lot compared to when they were still on the Tianyuan continent. As they grew stronger, the power they could unleash through the fusion would naturally be greater as well, and the backlash accompanying it would be even more powerful. Even they did not know whether the current Jianchen could endure the backlash from the fusion. "I've already made up my mind." "Ziying, Qing Su Ah, let's start," Jianchen said with determination. The sword spirits looked at each other and no longer said anything else. In the next moment, the sword spirits shone with intense violet and azure light. They turned into two illusionary swords completely condensed from violet and azure light above Jian Chen's head as powerful sword qi swept out. They seemed to have turned the surroundings into a domain of sword qi. The two swords lacked physical bodies right now, but having a physical body or not made no difference during the fusion because the fusion was Ziying and Qing Su's powers. It used the vital energies of the sword spirits, Supreme Yin Force and Supreme Yang Force. From chaos came Yin and Yang. Ziying and Qing Su Ah sprang into existence from a sliver of Supreme Yin Force and Supreme Yang Force. When their powers fused together, chaos would appear once again. Jian Chen stood below the two swords as he raised his hands over his head and towards the sky, into the two swords conjured from the sword spirits. The chaotic Niden within his dantian revolved wildly as turbulent chaotic force constantly surged out, filling Jian Chen's entire body. He pushed the defenses of his 13th layer chaotic body to the limit before using a combination of his arms and his will to gradually make the vital energies of the sword spirits approach each other. Mo Tianyun stood in the distance as he stared at Jian Chen closely. He was stern. Finally, the powers of the sword spirits were truly fused together under Jian Chen's efforts, becoming whole and creating a completely new power. Immediately, a terrifying pulse of energy that seemed to be responsible for splitting the heavens from the earth erupted. It made the entire space tremble as the intermingling laws all shook uncontrollably. Chapter 22-27, True Chaotic Force. 2. In the instance the chaotic force was created, it surged into Jian Chen's body, immediately causing him to tremble uncontrollably. His face became sheet white, and blood oozed out from the corner of his mouth. Although Jian Chen had reached the major achievement of the chaotic body, and his body was extremely tough, his current chaotic body was still too weak before true chaotic force. Without any exaggeration, his 13th layer chaotic body was no different from a child before the true chaotic force. As a result, he only lasted for a split second under the rampaging of true chaotic force before becoming heavily injured. His organs had been ripped to pieces, reduced to mush at an unbelievable speed by the terrifying destruction of the chaotic force. The white robes that represented his status as a radiant saint master turned blood red at a visible rate. In just a few seconds, the robes had become soaked in blood. At this moment, if it was possible to see through the clothes, it would quite be evident that Jian Chen's body had become cracked like pottery. Bright red chaotic blood oozed out furiously from his wounds. True chaotic force was just too powerful and too terrifying. With a violent presence of destruction, it completely surpassed all other energies in the world. In just a short instance, it shattered Jian Chen's chaotic body, causing him to become more heavily injured than he had ever been. When Mo Tianyun saw this from afar, his heart sank. The power of the chaotic force had completely exceeded his expectations. Don't keep charging up and do it quick. Otherwise, you'll die from the backlash before you can even deal strike, Mo Tianyun called out from afar. His voice boomed like thunder, causing the space to rumble. Jian Chen heard it clearly. Jian Chen's face twisted in agony as his consciousness flashed before his eyes. Not only did his body have to endure the backlash from the fusion, but even his soul was shaken up drastically. Waves of dizzying pain radiated out from his soul, making Jian Chen feel like his soul was about to be ripped apart. Arg! Jian Chen suddenly bellowed out. He endured with his great willpower, unleashing all the strength within his body to control the chaotic force with his raised arm, swinging it towards the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. The true chaotic force created from the fusion of the swords turned into an illusionary strand of sword qi in Jian Chen's arms. It shattered space and tore through the laws with an enshrouding light, slicing out with indescribable speed. At this moment, the world seemed to fall silent and be reduced to nothingness. Space was as fragile as glass while the 3,000 laws all bowed down. The chaotic force condensed between Jian Chen's arms seemed to possess the power to judge the world and destroy all. Like a supreme lord, it was unstoppable. During this process, the backlash Jian Chen experienced peaked as well. His face became frighteningly pale as he bled from all his facial orifices. His body trembled violently as layers of blood and flesh vanished from his body at a visible rate. The chaotic force was just too brutal, and the backlash was just too powerful. Before the attack even struck, a portion of Jian Chen's body had been reduced to nothingness. Puff. At this moment, a clear, crisp sound rang out. The chaotic force condensed between Jian Chen's arms finally struck the formation, and the formation that was so powerful that even the solitary sword ancestor was unable to do anything about it seemed as fragile as a bubble. It popped from just the slightest contact. A huge crack was effortlessly ripped in the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. The interior was clearly visible through the crack as the flames radiated with terrifying heat that was enough to burn space to a crisp, raging for all of eternity. At this moment, a black-robed middle-aged man sat in the formation. He was extremely powerful, where just the surging presence he gave off was enough for stars to tremble and space to disintegrate. He sat in the center of the flames, and a green leaf that was only 2 fingers wide hovered above his head, shining with a faint, green light around him. It kept the roaring flames at bay. The black-robed man seemed exactly the same as the Mo Tianyun that Jian Chen was familiar with. He was Mo Tianyun's original body, having been trapped here for several tens of thousand years. Right when the crack appeared in the formation, the black-robed Mo Tianyun's eyes snapped open. His eyes shone brightly, causing the roaring flames to twist slightly. At the same time, an extremely ancient-looking man sat in another region of the formation in cloth robes. However, Mo Tianyun's original body had to endure the scorching of the flames at all times, while the old man was several dozen meters away, seated at a location where flames did not exist. He was unable to feel any of the heat from the flames. The old man sat in the only safe position in the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. Suddenly, the old man's eyes snapped open. He stared in the distance with an ugly expression and cried out, "The flame reverend's cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus has actually been destroyed. Who has destroyed it?" As he said that, the old man wanted to struggle to his feet, but as soon as he moved, black chains immediately appeared around him, restraining him on the spot. The black chains were condensed from pure and powerful demonic aura. It seeped into the old man's body, restraining him completely. Seeing how he was bound by chains, The old man's face became extremely sunken. The light in his eyes flickered a few times before he suddenly called out, "It doesn't matter who you are. Please leave here immediately and announce to the saints' world that the Empyrean Demon Lord is someone from both the demons and the immortals' worlds. I don't care what ties you have with the Empyrean Demon Lord, but this is a significant matter. You must bear in mind what situation you stand in. Do not work with the people of the immortals and demons world and commit a great sin." If the other experts of the saints' world really did end up hearing the old man's words, they would probably sever all ties with Mo Tianyun after considering their circumstance, even if they had some ties with Mo Tianyun. They might even directly announce this shocking piece of news to the saints' world, allowing everyone to learn about it. However, the old man had never considered that the person who destroyed the formation would not be an expert of the saints' world, but someone who was from the immortals' world like Mo Tianyun. Saint of Grand Harmony, don't waste your efforts. You won't have the opportunity to expose my secrets to the saints' world. At this moment, Mo Tianyun's voice rang out. Demonic aura surged out from around Mo Tianyun as he gave off a presence that was as vast as the starry sky itself. He strode through the flames as if he was walking on the cracks of space and directly arrived before the old man. Now that the formation was destroyed, the roaring flames no longer possessed the same power as before, even though they did not disperse. They were no longer able to trap Mo Tianyun. Empyrean Demon Lord, the Flame Reverend will never spare you, the old man referred to as the Saint of Grand Harmony stared at Mo Tianyun as he spoke through gritted teeth. He was filled with hatred. The Flame Reverend has even hidden himself, so would he be bold enough to show himself? Moreover, my bloodline is no weaker than the warring gods of your saints' world. If the Flame Reverend really does come, why would I fear him? Mo Tianyun said before striking the Saint of Grand Harmony's head with his hand. Restrained, the Saint of Grand Harmony was unable to fight back at all. His head shattered with that, and his soul was forcefully restrained, gripped in Mo Tianyun's hand. However, the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul was extremely extraordinary. It was like a miniature sun, shining with resplendent light. It was an extremely powerful soul. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.